In the quiet outskirts of Pallet Town, long before Gary Oak became a name carried across regions, long before badges, tournaments, rankings, or reputation, there existed a boy growing up in the gentle rhythm of a place untouched by urgency. The sunlight over the tall grass, the soft winds flowing along the wooden fences, and the distant call of wild Pokémon framed his earliest observations of the world. Even in those early days, his pace was confident, steady, and full of a curiosity that seemed etched into him long before he could articulate its shape. His presence carried an unspoken certainty, not loud or boastful in these early years, but rooted in the deep soil of Pallet Town's quiet simplicity. Gary's life began in the shadow and warmth of lineage. The Oak family, known across Kanto and beyond, carried a legacy intertwined with knowledge, discovery, and the vast tapestry of Pokémon research. Professor Oak, his grandfather, maintained a presence that was both gentle and immense, like a tree whose roots extended across the region. Gary grew accustomed to the scent of polished instruments, stacks of notes, and the faint hum of delicate machinery. While other children played freely in the fields, he often observed quietly in the laboratory's cool atmosphere, absorbing the subtle messages of data, research, and the unending connection between people and Pokémon. From those earliest days, Gary felt a pull to understand rather than simply watch. He saw Pokémon not merely as companions, but as reflections of a world filled with patterns, mysteries, and lessons waiting patiently to be discovered. The professor never pressured him toward this path. Instead, Gary gravitated naturally, compelled by a desire to know more, to explore, to expand beyond the horizons of his small hometown. That quiet magnetism shaped his hands and eyes, teaching him how to approach the world with both precision and imagination. It was in these soft, formative years that the parallel thread of his life began weaving itself alongside another, the path of the region's other young trainer, destined one day to become both mirror and counterbalance. While Pallet Town was small, its stories grew large within its boundaries. And these two children, only steps apart in age and origin, were unknowingly crafting a shared narrative long before either of them set foot onto a proper journey. Their personalities diverged in temperament, yet converged in destiny, forming a dual arc that would grow stronger with every step forward. For Gary, the early bond with his grandfather shaped the foundation of everything that followed. The professor's steady presence provided a calm rhythm to daily life. Early mornings spent observing wild Pokémon near the river edge, quiet afternoons absorbing books far too advanced for his age, evenings illuminated by the soft glow of research screens while the laboratory settled into a peaceful hush. These moments formed a slow, gentle, educational current that flowed steadily through Gary's childhood, instilling in him a sense of balance between ambition and understanding. Even from a young age, his connection with Pokémon grew not out of necessity or circumstance, but out of genuine fascination. He regarded each creature as a complex system of instincts, behaviors, and potential. When he sat in the grass watching flocks of Pidgey glide between trees, he noticed the subtle hierarchy of their movements, the patterns of their landing and ascent. When he observed a lone Rattata forage in the tall weeds, he paid attention to the shifts in its posture, the timing of its pauses, and the way it sensed its surroundings. These early quiet studies shaped the intuitive understanding that would later make Gary not only a capable trainer, but a deeply analytical one. Though he was still far from the battles, leagues, and stages where his name would one day resonate, Gary's character developed through these small, patient experiences. He learned how to see layers others overlooked. He learned discipline through observation. He learned to trust his instincts while grounding them in knowledge. And gradually, through this gentle accumulation of insight, he began cultivating the ambition that would drive him forward across regions. The parallel thread of his life, the presence of the protagonist with whom his story would intertwine, remained subtle at this stage. Their early interactions were minimal, often passing glances or shared moments of childhood exploration, both too young to fully understand how deeply their paths were already aligning. Where Gary sought precision and mastery, the other carried spontaneity and instinct. Without realizing it, both pushed the other indirectly, shaping the earliest contours of a rivalry built not on hostility but on contrast, complement, and the quiet tension between two distinct philosophies of what it meant to be a trainer. Gary grew increasingly aware of the, quote, unspoken expectations that came with his family name. People spoke of the professor with reverence, and they looked at Gary with curiosity, wondering if he would inherit this legacy or diverge from it. Yet within him, there was no pressure, only a gradual unfolding of desire. He did not wish to be a copy of his grandfather. He wished to expand upon the foundation, explore where new paths could lead, and push himself and his Pokémon toward the highest forms of mastery. He continued to learn in the tranquil environment of Pallet Town, where mornings rose gently and nights settled peacefully. His first interactions with Pokémon partners were not yet formal, but the bonds formed early. He spent time with the professor's lab assistants, observing the careful process of nurturing young Pokémon, studying their habits, and understanding the delicate bond between care and growth. These experiences taught him early on that success did not come from dominance, but from harmony, even though his youthful confidence sometimes expressed itself through an eagerness to push boundaries. The protagonist, meanwhile, grew in parallel, shaped by different influences, forming a relationship with Pokémon based more on heart than on structure. The contrast between them deepened naturally, a quiet duality that existed long before either of them recognized it. Each boy shaped the other simply through presence. The existence of a counterpart sharpened desire, honed curiosity, and created an unspoken energy that fueled both paths. Gary's ambition matured gradually, fed not by rivalry alone, but by the steady accumulation of knowledge, practice, and introspection. By the time he approached the age when trainers traditionally began their journeys, he had already developed a strong internal framework. He knew how to analyze, observe, and understand. He knew how to adapt and recalibrate. He knew how to move forward methodically without losing the spark of excitement that accompanied discovery. His bond with the professor remained central, offering guidance without restriction. Oak's supportive presence acted as a compass that kept Gary aligned with deeper values despite the intensifying desire to excel. Pokémon were not tools or trophies to him. Even in these early moments, they were partners, reflections of his growth, receptacles of his understanding. Each future victory would one day carry the imprint of these slow beginnings, shaped by quiet mornings in Pallet Town and thoughtful afternoons in the laboratory. As Gary prepared to step into adolescence, the pull of the horizon became stronger. He found himself looking beyond the wooden fences around Pallet Town, imagining the winding routes, bustling cities, and wild terrains that awaited him. The protagonist, too, would soon feel this call, and their paths, already intertwined invisibly, would soon converge in more active ways. Yet here, at the true start, Gary remained grounded in stillness. The calm environment of his childhood, the guide of his grandfather, and the silent presence of the boy who would become his rival formed the foundation of everything he would become. These beginnings shaped him in ways he did not yet understand, preparing him for journeys marked not only by victory, but by introspection, not only by competition, but by parallel growth. In the soft quiet of Pallet Town, where the grass swayed gently and the distant sounds of Pokémon echoed through open fields, Gary's story began its first true ascent. Not through battles or triumphs, but through quiet observation, growing ambition, and the slow formation of a destiny intertwined not only with Pokémon, but with another trainer who would walk beside him, push against him, and define the rhythm of his journey for years to come. The transition from childhood into early adolescence unfolded gently for Gary, shaped by the quiet consistency of Pallet Town's rhythm and the deepening connections within his small circle of influence. As the seasons shifted across the grassy fields and the calm rivers, Gary's awareness of himself, his goals, and the world beyond grew clearer. He began to feel the subtle pull of something larger, an emerging horizon of purpose slowly revealing itself through the disciplined habits he practiced daily. Though still grounded in the familiar cadence of the Oak Laboratory, he now saw each moment as part of a greater trajectory. His mornings often started earlier than most of Pallet Town's residents. The sun would rise gently over the hills, casting soft golden light through the trees, while Gary moved quietly through the laboratory, drawn toward the soft hum of incubators and the delicate glow of research equipment. The early silence allowed him space to think, to observe, and to imagine. It was during these quiet hours that he began refining the skill of patient examination, watching the young Pokémon in their earliest stages of development, analyzing their movements, and recording observations with care. These small tasks formed a slow and steady foundation for the deeper journey ahead. The presence of the professor remained a guiding force, offering steady wisdom without imposing direction. Gary admired him deeply, recognizing even at this young age the breadth of his grandfather's experience. Oak's research extended across generations and regions, connecting countless trainers and discoveries. Being raised in such proximity to this world made Gary feel both grounded and inspired. He sensed the weight of tradition not as a burden, but as a gentle invitation to explore, contribute, and perhaps one day elevate the legacy even further. Yet Gary was not the only one preparing quietly for a future beyond Pallet Town. Across the small community, the other boy, destined to become Gary's lifelong parallel, was also growing, learning, and shaping his own way of seeing the world. Their personalities diverged sharply, but their stories moved forward on paths woven increasingly close. Where Gary's growth was structured and analytical, the protagonist's was instinctive and emotionally charged. Where Gary sought patterns, the other sought adventure. Where Gary studied, the other explored. This contrast created an invisible tension and balance that neither fully recognized but both intuitively felt. In the fields near Pallet Town, the two boys occasionally crossed paths during their independent explorations. Their early interactions, though infrequent and simple, carried beneath them an energetic undertone, a silent awareness that each represented something essential to the other. Gary saw in the protagonist a natural spontaneity he rarely allowed himself. The protagonist saw in Gary a certainty and confidence that felt both admirable and challenging. These impressions, though subtle, created an early sense of mutual shaping, each boy unknowingly sharpening the other's ambitions. Gary's relationship with Pokémon deepened in these years, growing from basic fascination to a structured practice of understanding. He observed individual personalities with increasing clarity, noticing the ways, physical attributes, instinctual tendencies, and behavioral patterns intertwined to create unique identities. When he spent time at the outskirts of town watching wild Pokémon move through the tall grass, he saw not random creatures, but interconnected systems, each responding to environment, survival, and community. The ease with which he noticed these details set him apart even before he held an official team. Meanwhile, his bond with the protagonist evolved subtly from distant acknowledgement to quiet rivalry. Both sensed the approaching age of beginning their journeys, the moment when they would receive their first Pokémon and step into the uncertain expanse of Kanto. As this milestone grew closer, the invisible magnetic line between them tightened. Gary felt it first not as pressure, but as a tug, a call to refine himself further. He began training physically, running laps around Pallet Town's winding paths in the early mornings, strengthening his endurance so he could travel longer distances when his journey finally began. In the afternoons, he returned to the laboratory, engaging with Pokémon under Oak's supervision. The professor would often have him assist with feeding, grooming, and mild behavioral exercises. Gary approached every task with a seriousness uncommon for his age, studying each interaction, absorbing lessons that would later inform his strategies as a trainer. He learned how to recognize subtle signs of discomfort, excitement, or fatigue in Pokémon. He learned how communication extended far beyond spoken commands and into a silent language of movement, energy, and intention. These early lessons became a mental archive he would rely on heavily in future battles. The protagonist, in contrast, formed bonds with Pokémon more through instinct and emotion than through study. The warm openness with which he approached both people and creatures created an entirely different form of connection, one that Gary could not replicate but began to respect. This difference in approach laid the foundation for a rivalry defined by complementary strengths. Neither method was superior. Each created a unique relationship between trainer and Pokémon. These contrasting paths would later shape their battles, their victories, and their growth in distinct but interconnected ways. As Gary moved through these formative years, he began to imagine what his journey might look like. Routes he had studied on maps became places he pictured vividly. The winding forest pathways of Viridian, the sunlit expanses of Route 1, the towering structures of Pewter City, and the mysterious caves and cliffs that lay further ahead. He pictured meeting new Pokémon, studying unfamiliar environments, and rising through the ranks of the region's greatest trainers. The idea of gym challenges stirred a quiet ambition within him. He wanted to measure himself, to test his knowledge, to prove that his structured approach could hold its own against the many unpredictable challenges the world would present. Still, the idea of competition with the protagonist became intertwined with these visions, not out of conflict, but from an unspoken awareness that their journeys were complementary. Gary imagined surpassing him, being recognized as the stronger of the two, not out of malice, but out of the natural momentum of his ambition. In turn, he knew that the protagonist's progress would push him to grow faster, study harder, and refine his skills continuously. Their rivalry was not born from hostility, but from mutual elevation, a quiet force driving both forward, the professor observed. This developing dynamic with quiet understanding, Oak saw the potential in both boys and knew that their intertwined growth would shape their futures far more profoundly than either realized. He allowed their paths to intersect naturally, never forcing competition, but understanding that some rivalries form through destiny rather than intention. He provided guidance where needed, but allowed each boy to cultivate his own motivations. Gary, in particular, absorbed this freedom with earnest dedication, using it to define who he wished to become rather than following a path expected of him. As months passed, Gary's confidence deepened. He began assisting the professor in more advanced research tasks, organizing data, observing rare Pokémon brought to the lab for study, and helping maintain environmental conditions for sensitive species. These responsibilities shaped his sense of purpose and strengthened the disciplined mindset that would later become one of his most defining traits as a trainer. Though he still lacked a Pokémon partner of his own, he acted as though he were already training for the journey ahead. The protagonist, too, began preparing in his own way, less structured, more spontaneous, driven by a different kind of curiosity. Gary noticed this from afar, recognizing the contrast but also understanding it. Their parallel paths continued weaving silently together, each boy shaping himself for the adventure soon to begin. On the outskirts of town, near the gentle rolling fields, where wild Pokémon grazed in the late afternoons, Gary often stood alone, watching the horizon. He imagined the first steps of his journey, the moment he would leave Pallet Town behind and step onto the sunlit path leading north. He imagined the quiet anticipation of receiving his first Pokémon, the weight of his Pokéballs clipped to his belt, the distant echoes of wild creatures calling from hidden areas. He pictured the many places he would explore, the gym leaders he would challenge, and the victories he hoped to earn, not through chance, but through preparation, mastery, and deep understanding. Yet even in these moments of solitary reflection, the presence of the protagonist lingered in the corner of his awareness, like a shadow cast alongside his own. Gary sensed that no matter how far he traveled, no matter how many victories he achieved, their stories would continually intersect. There was a rhythm forming between them, one that neither had consciously chosen but both had begun to follow. It was the rhythm of parallel growth, of mutual sharpening, of two destinies shaped not by conflict, but by interwoven purpose. As the final year before his journey approached, everything seemed to settle into place. His understanding of Pokémon had grown, his confidence had matured, and his ambitions had crystallized into a clear vision. The world beyond Pallet Town no longer felt abstract. It felt inevitable, like a horizon he had been preparing to reach. Since childhood, in the soft calm of Pallet Town's evenings, where the orange glow of sunset stretched across open fields and gentle breezes carried the distant songs of wild Pokémon, Gary stood ready to begin the next chapter of his life. His bond with his grandfather, his quiet rivalry with the protagonist, his disciplined understanding of Pokémon, and his growing ambition had all converged into a single, steady momentum. Soon, He would step beyond Pallet Town. Soon, he would choose his first Pokémon. Soon, the intertwined journey would truly begin. And in that quiet anticipation, Gary felt not pressure, not fear, but a deep, calm certainty. A sense that he was moving exactly where he needed to go, guided by years of insight, shaped by parallel momentum, and ready to carve his own legacy into the fabric of the Pokémon world. The final days before Gary's official start as a Pokémon trainer settled over Pallet Town with a feeling both quiet and anticipatory, like the air just before a gentle summer rain. The town retained its peaceful rhythm, slowpokes lounging near the riverbank, Pidgeys fluttering between rooftops, the soft hum of cicadas rising with late afternoon warmth. But beneath the familiar spaces and sounds, a subtle tension grew. It was not anxiety, but a soft, expanding awareness shared by everyone who understood what this moment represented. Children became trainers in Pallet Town with a sense of ceremony, and in Gary's case, the significance resonated with a deeper tone. He felt the change most strongly in the early mornings. The sun rose the same way it always had, climbing slowly over the distant hills. But something about the light felt more deliberate, more symbolic, as though it were quietly acknowledging the shift in his life's trajectory. Gary stepped outside each morning before the rest of the household was awake, allowing the cool air to settle around him as he surveyed the quiet streets. The paths he had walked countless times before now appeared different, not altered in shape, but carrying the silent promise of departure. He spent these mornings running through his routine with greater attention than usual. Every stretch, every step, every breath felt like a small preparation for the coming journey. He treated each moment with care, aware that this was the final stretch before stepping into a world full of uncertainties and immense possibilities. His physical training, once simply a habit, now felt like a ritual that bridged the boy he had been with, the trainer he would soon become. Inside the laboratory, the air carried faint traces of grass, old books, and the metallic scent of equipment, aromas that had accompanied Gary for years. But now, each detail seemed heightened. The quiet, rhythmic blinking of incubation machines felt oddly reassuring. Shelves lined with Pokeballs, labeled meticulously with various specimen numbers, reflected a subtle glow from overhead lights. The stacks of research papers, filled with the observations he had helped collect, symbolized the countless lessons that had shaped him. The professor observed Gary with a calm, knowing gaze. He did not speak often of what was coming, but he understood the importance of this quiet transition. He had seen many children take their first steps as trainers, but watching his grandson do so carried a particular weight. Oak provided guidance only when needed, allowing Gary to maintain the sense of independence that had always driven him. The professor's presence created a space that felt both grounding and inspiring, offering the reassurance of tradition while allowing room for Gary to form his own path. As the days dwindled toward the moment when he would finally receive his first Pokémon, Gary found himself reflecting more deeply on his connection with the protagonist. Their rivalry had grown slowly but steadily over the years. It was never openly confrontational, yet it carried a momentum of its own. Even without exchanging direct challenges, they shaped each other through their parallel ambitions. The knowledge that they would begin their journeys on the same day added a quiet depth to the anticipation. Gary felt the weight of this unspoken bond in the background of every thought. In these final days, Gary often wandered to the edge of Pallet Town during his free hours. The borders between the town and the wild felt more symbolic than ever. He walked along grassy fields where small Pokémon foraged or rested. He watched the way the light filtered through leaves, casting patterns across the ground. He noticed the shifting winds, the rustle of wings overhead, and the distant cry of a Spearow drifting across the open sky. Each detail offered a glimpse into the larger world he was preparing to enter, a world full of independent rhythms, unknown challenges, and vast ecosystems. Sometimes, during these quiet explorations, Gary's thoughts drifted toward the journey ahead, not as a single path, but as a network of possible routes. He pictured reaching Viridian City, navigating its busy streets, and learning to adapt to the unfamiliar pace. He thought of forests, rich with wild Pokémon, each with strengths and behaviors he would need to study carefully. He imagined stepping into Pewter Gym, facing a leader whose methods and experience far surpassed anything he had encountered before. These images came to him not as fantasies but as achievable milestones, stepping stones in a progression he felt fully ready to begin. His confidence was steady, shaped by years of preparation, observation, and self-discipline. He knew that beginning a journey as a trainer was not simply about battling or collecting badges. It required understanding environments, reading Pokémon behavior, adjusting strategies, and constantly absorbing new knowledge. Gary's strength lay not only in ambition, but in this foundation of analytical awareness. He felt prepared not because he assumed victory, but because he had taken the time to build a relationship with the principles behind Pokémon training. As his reflections grew deeper, so too did his awareness of the protagonist's preparations. Though their methods differed greatly, Gary recognized the sincerity behind the protagonist's enthusiasm. He knew that this enthusiasm would translate into unexpected strengths, intuitive connections, and moments of resilience that defied logic. Gary respected this, even if he rarely expressed it. Their journeys would begin in the same place, shaped by the same environment, but each would carve its own distinct path. And yet, Gary understood that their stories would continue to intersect in ways neither could fully predict. On the final evening before receiving his first Pokémon, Gary returned to the laboratory out of habit. He moved through the familiar spaces slowly, absorbing each detail like a memory he wanted to preserve. The ambient hum of machinery felt comforting. The soft glow of monitors cast gentle light across the floor. Notes he had written in earlier months lay stacked neatly on a desk, reminders of the countless hours spent learning the foundational principles that now guided him. He walked past the shelves of Pokeballs, each meticulously placed, each containing a life shaped by unique traits and potential. It struck him that soon one of these would be his partner, a Pokémon that would accompany him across forests, mountains, cities, and unfamiliar territories. The thought filled him with a quiet sense of excitement and gratitude. It also deepened his awareness of the responsibility he was about to accept. A Pokémon was not a tool, but a companion, one that would rely on him as much as he relied on it. Gary paused near one of the open windows of the lab, gazing out at the soft twilight that had settled over Pallet Town. The sky carried hues of orange and purple, blending gently, and the air felt warm and still. In the distance, he could see faint lights flickering in neighboring houses, families preparing for the night. Somewhere beyond those lights, the protagonist was surely experiencing the same sense of anticipation, the same quiet transition. Though they moved through life differently, their shared moment connected them in a way Gary understood deeply. He stepped outside to breathe in the calm air, letting the gentle evening breeze wash over him. The grass rustled lightly underfoot, and the distant sound of the ocean drifted from the coast. Pallet Town felt both familiar and far away in this moment, as though it were already receding into memory, even while he still stood within it. Gary recognized the strange mixture of longing and readiness that accompanied transitions of this scale. He felt grateful for his upbringing, for the lessons learned, for the bond with the professor, and even for the silent rivalry that had pushed him to refine himself continually. That night, sleep came slowly but peacefully. Gary's thoughts moved fluidly between memories of his childhood and visions of the future unfolding ahead. He pictured the moment of receiving his first Pokémon, the excitement of stepping onto Route 1, the new challenges waiting just beyond the familiar borders of Pallet Town. His breath settled into a steady rhythm, and the gentle calm of anticipation wrapped around him like a warm blanket. Morning arrived softly. The sunlight filtered through the window with an almost ceremonial glow. Gary rose with a sense of purpose, moving through his routine with quiet deliberation. Every action, washing his face, tying his shoes, stepping outside, felt symbolic. The air carried a fresh scent, infused with the same promise of new beginnings he had sensed for days. The walk to the laboratory felt different than it ever had before. The path, though, unchanged, seemed to stretch forward with intent, guiding him toward a moment he had envisioned countless times. The buildings around him appeared familiar yet distant, as though he were already viewing them from the threshold of a new life. Inside the laboratory, the professor greeted him with the same calm warmth that had accompanied him throughout his upbringing. Though the day carried immense personal meaning, Oak maintained his composed demeanor, allowing Gary to enter the moment with his own sense of significance. The room felt spacious, the air filled with a subtle sense of ceremony without any need for excessive formality. Gary approached the table where 3 Pokeballs rested. Each one held a unique potential. Each one represented a partnership that could shape his entire journey. Though he had seen these Pokeballs countless times before, today they carried a new weight, a reminder of the decision he was about to make and the life he was preparing to share. He took his time, allowing himself to feel the moment fully. His breath remained steady. His thoughts remained clear. He reached out with calm certainty, guided not by impulse, but by intuition shaped through years of study and observation. The instant his hand touched the cool surface of the Pokeball he had chosen, a quiet sense of alignment settled through him, as though his journey had finally begun weaving itself into motion. Holding the Pokeball, Gary felt an unexpected softness in his chest, something like gratitude, anticipation, and quiet joy blending into a single sensation. He knew that this moment marked the beginning of everything he had prepared for. It also symbolized the start of a long, intricate path that would run parallel to the protagonists, shaped by rivalry, respect, and the countless experiences they would share across their journeys. Stepping out of the laboratory, Gary paused to take in the sight of Pallet Town one last time before beginning his adventure. The familiar buildings, the quiet streets, the gentle breeze, all of it felt like a quiet farewell, a final reminder of where he had come from and what had shaped him. With his first Pokémon by his side, his ambitions steady, and the world opening before him, Gary took his first step toward the horizon. The path ahead was vast and unpredictable, but he felt ready to grow, ready to learn, ready to challenge himself and the world, ready to meet the protagonist again along the winding roads that would inevitably bring them together. The journey had begun. The first day of Gary's journey as a Pokémon trainer carried a quiet significance that settled gently around him like an early morning mist. The world seemed to move with a slower, more deliberate rhythm, as though acknowledging the transition he had just crossed. Even the air felt different, crisp and cool against his skin, laden with the scent of dew-soaked grass and distant saltwater drifting from the ocean beyond Pallet Town's edge. Though everything around him remained familiar, each detail now shimmered with the subtle energy of new beginnings. Holding his chosen Pokeball, Gary felt an unfamiliar mixture of steadiness and awe. For years he had studied countless Pokémon, assisted his grandfather in research tasks, and watched the bonds between trainers and their partners with an analytical eye. He had dissected behaviors, patterns, movements, and instincts, but nothing, not even the most meticulous observation, could fully prepare him for the quiet, emotional shift that came from knowing he had a Pokémon of his own. The reality of partnership resonated through him with a depth he had not expected. He moved slowly along the small dirt path leading away from the laboratory, his steps measured and thoughtful. Sunlight filtered through the branches above, casting gentle patterns across the ground. Pidgeys fluttered from tree to tree, their wings beating softly against the morning air. The familiar sounds of Pallet Town wrapped around him, soft, unobtrusive, and comforting. Yet beneath their familiarity lay hints of something broader, as though they blended seamlessly into the distant sounds of the world beyond, inviting him to continue forward. Gary paused for a moment near a small clearing just outside the town's boundary, taking in the view of the wide expanse ahead. Route 1 stretched forward in a long, grassy corridor dotted with patches of tall weeds, wildflowers swaying with the breeze, and the faint glimmer of early morning wildlife moving through. The brush. It was a landscape he had seen countless times from a distance, yet now it appeared different, more alive, more vibrant, more meaningful. This was the threshold he had prepared for, the beginning of the journey he had imagined through countless quiet evenings. His mind drifted to the protagonist, somewhere nearby and preparing for the same departure. Though Gary did not see him, he felt the presence of their parallel steps, moving in tandem. They were beginning the same path, on the same morning, under the same sky. Their journeys, though independent, were woven together by proximity and purpose. Gary felt no hesitation, no tension, only the steady awareness that their rivalry would continue to shape and refine him as he moved deeper into the world. With a slow breath, he continued walking, letting the rhythm of his footsteps settle into a calm cadence. As he moved, he thought about his new partner, housed within the Pokeball, resting at his side. He imagined the Pokemon's unique temperament, its instincts, its potential. Gary had chosen with care, guided by a blend of intuition and insight, selecting the partner he believed would align most seamlessly with his approach. He saw this partnership as a long-term bond, one that would grow and strengthen through trust, training, and shared experience. Gary reached a small hill, overlooking the stretch of Route 1. He paused there, taking in the full landscape. The grass shimmered faintly under the sunlight, swaying in sweeping waves with the wind. A pair of Rattata darted through the foliage, their movements quick and purposeful. A Butterfree drifted gently across the sky, its wings catching the light in delicate patterns. Everything felt alive, interconnected, and quietly inviting. For a moment, Gary closed his eyes and allowed the sensations to settle. The warm sunlight on his face, the gentle hum of distant wildlife, the soft whisper of wind weaving through the trees, all of it grounded him deeply in the present moment. He felt a sense of alignment between himself, his new partner, and the path ahead. His thoughts settled into a calm clarity, shaped by the understanding that each step he took from this point onward would contribute to a broader journey, a larger story. When he opened his eyes again, he moved forward with renewed purpose. His strides carried him into the tall grass of Route 1, the first true territory beyond the safe borders of Pallet Town. The sensation was subtle but powerful. Each step felt like a declaration of independence, a movement towards something greater than himself. The texture of the terrain underfoot shifted, becoming slightly uneven, more natural, less groomed. It reminded him that the world beyond his home followed its own rhythms, shaped by countless forces he would need to understand. As he walked, Gary observed the environment closely. He studied the patterns in the grass where Pokémon had passed through, the faint claw marks left on a nearby tree, the subtle difference between the sounds of different species rustling through the weeds. His mind cataloged these details instinctively, connecting them to knowledge he had accumulated over the years. The world around him became a living study, an ever-changing landscape filled with insights waiting to be uncovered. The presence of his partner remained a steady reassurance at his side. Though the Pokémon had not yet emerged from its Pokéball, Gary felt its silent connection. He imagined the moment when he would release it into the open air, when the two of them would face the world together. He pictured how the partnership would grow, how trust would form through shared challenges, how familiarity would deepen through routine training, how strength would emerge through understanding. As the morning unfolded, Gary encountered his first wild Pokémon along the route. A small flock of Spearow gathered near a thicket, pecking at seeds scattered across the ground. They glanced up briefly as he passed, but returned quickly to their foraging, unconcerned by his presence. Gary observed them with calm interest, analyzing the synchronization of their movements, the subtle hierarchy within their group, the efficiency with which they scattered and reassembled. He appreciated the opportunity to observe without interference, recognizing that this world existed independent of human involvement, guided by instincts and natural balance. Further along the route, Gary reached a small pond nestled between gentle hills. The water reflected the sky like a polished mirror, its surface disturbed only by the occasional ripple of a Magikarp swimming near the surface or the soft landing of a Poliwag hopping from the shore. Gary sat near the edge for a moment, letting the calm atmosphere settle around him. He could feel the tension in his body melting away as he breathed in the cool, earthy scent of the water and the surrounding grass. This moment of rest brought him a deeper awareness of the journey's emotional landscape. Though he had approached this beginning with confidence and readiness, the quiet reality of being on his own for the first time carried a gentle weight. It was not loneliness, but a heightened sense of independence. The world around him felt vast, stretching endlessly in every direction, filled with possibilities and uncertainties. It was a feeling he embraced willingly, knowing that this vastness was where growth happened. Gary touched the Pokeball at his side, acknowledging the silent presence of his partner. He felt the subtle energy emanating from the sphere, a warmth that represented not only the Pokemon's physical existence, but the potential of their bond. He pictured the upcoming moments when they would train together, face challenges, and evolve both individually and as a team. He saw in his mind the first battle they would share, the first victory, the first lesson drawn from a mistake. Each of these future experiences felt real, tangible, close enough to touch. As the afternoon light shifted, casting longer shadows across the landscape, Gary rose from his resting place and continued along the path. The terrain gradually softened into a smoother trail leading toward Viridian City, the first major landmark of his journey. He had visited the city before, during trips with his grandfather, but approaching it now as a trainer carried a new meaning. It symbolized a step further into the world, a place where he would test his growing skills and begin to understand how different environments influence training and strategy. As he walked, Gary's mind drifted once more to the protagonist. Though he did not know where along the route the other boy was, he felt their journeys unfolding simultaneously, parallel lines stretching forward with intricate intersections awaiting them. He felt a surge of motivation, not from a desire to surpass the protagonist, but from the understanding that their paths were intertwined. Each would challenge the other, inspire the other, and shape the other's growth. Their rivalry was a quiet synergy, pushing them toward greater heights. By the time Gary reached the outskirts of Viridian City, the sky had softened into warm hues of orange and pink. The city lights began to flicker gently, illuminating the edges of streets and buildings. The air carried a faint mix of natural scents and the subtle aroma of baked goods drifting from a nearby shop. Viridian felt alive in a way that Pallet Town did not. Busier, more dynamic, filled with movements and sounds that blended into a steady hum. Gary stepped into the city with calm confidence, absorbing the atmosphere without feeling overwhelmed. He paused near the Pokémon Center, observing trainers coming and going. Some appeared weary from travel, others energized by recent victories. Their Pokémon rested at their sides or nestled comfortably within their Pokéballs. Gary took in their expressions, their equipment, their postures, analyzing details instinctively. He recognized patterns in the way experienced trainers moved, focused, steady, alert. He also recognized the excited uncertainty in those who, like him, had only just begun their journeys. Inside, the Pokémon Center carried a soothing atmosphere. Soft lights glowed overhead, and the faint hum of the healing machines blended into a calming background sound. Gary stepped forward with deliberate composure, acknowledging the importance of maintaining his Pokémon's health from the very first day. As he handed over the Pokéball, he felt a subtle shift, a deeper acceptance of responsibility, a reaffirmation of the partnership he had chosen. Waiting for his Pokémon to be returned reminded him that training was not only about strength, but about care, rest, and connection. When he received the Pokéball again, he felt a quiet reassurance in knowing his partner was restored to full health. Stepping outside, into the evening air, Gary looked toward the path leading deeper into Viridian, then toward the forest beyond. He knew that the coming days would test everything he had learned, the strategies he had practiced, the observations he had made, the discipline he had cultivated. He welcomed these challenges, understanding that each moment of effort would draw him closer to the trainer he aspired to become. As night settled over the city, Gary found a small, quiet clearing just beyond the lights of the buildings. He sat there, listening to the distant sounds of nocturnal Pokémon stirring as stars emerged overhead. He felt the calm weight of the day settle over him, mixed with quiet anticipation for the journey ahead. With his partner by his side, the world unfolding before him, and a steady confidence growing within, Gary embraced the first night of his adventure with a sense of purpose, both peaceful and profound. His journey had only just begun, and already it felt like a story shaped by destiny, discipline, and the quiet rhythm of determination. The morning sun rose over Viridian City with a soft, muted glow, spreading gentle light across rooftops, quiet streets, and the winding paths that led toward the dense threshold of Viridian Forest. Gary woke before most of the city stirred, rising with a sense of calm purpose that seemed to expand within him with each breath. The day ahead carried a weight different from the one before. This was not simply another step along his journey, but the beginning of a deeper immersion into the world itself. Viridian Forest was a place known for its wild beauty, unpredictable encounters, and the quiet lessons it offered to every trainer who entered. And today, Gary would face those lessons for the first time. He stepped outside the Pokémon Center, inhaling the crisp morning air. A thin layer of dew coated the grass, shimmering faintly beneath the early sunlight. The city felt quieter at this hour, its sounds subdued, replaced by the distant calls of morning Pokémon greeting the dawn. Pidgeys circled overhead, their wings glinting in the warmth of rising light. Small groups of Rattata scurried through alleyways, darting into shadows as the city gradually came to life. Gary observed these details with the same calm attentiveness that had guided him since the start of his journey. Each sound, each movement contributed to a greater tapestry of understanding, shaping his awareness of how environments influenced Pokémon behavior. With his partner's Pokéball secured at his side, Gary walked toward the outskirts of the city, taking the path that sloped gently upward toward the towering wall of trees in the distance. The forest loomed quietly, its canopy dense and textured, casting a cool shadow across the entrance. It was a landscape unlike the open fields of Pallet Town or the structured paths of Route 1. Here, nature's complexity deepened, layered with interconnected systems that required keen perception and adaptability. Gary felt a quiet thrill stir in his chest, not of fear, but of anticipation. He had studied this forest for years through maps, research papers, and stories shared by experienced trainers. Now, he would experience it firsthand. As he approached the entrance, the air grew cooler, carrying the earthy scent of moss and damp bark. A soft breeze rustled through the leaves overhead, creating a chorus of whispering sounds that blended into a calming rhythm. Gary stepped forward, allowing his senses to adjust to the gradual dimming of light beneath the canopy. The forest welcomed him, not with grandeur, but with subtlety. The atmosphere wrapped around him gently, its quiet depth drawing him inward. He paused for a moment, taking in the towering trees that stretched high above, their trunks thick and ancient, their branches interwoven to create a ceiling of shifting green light. Shafts of sunlight filtered through in soft beams, casting patterns across the forest floor. Small Pokémon darted between patches of tall grass, their movements barely perceptible unless one knew where to look. Gary's eyes tracked these subtle signs instinctively, studying the forest with the analytical precision he had developed over years of watching and learning. Releasing his partner from the Pokéball, Gary observed the Pokémon with quiet appreciation. The creature stretched, adjusting to the forest air, its instincts awakening with the familiar scent of wild terrain. Gary watched the Pokémon's posture, its breathing, the way its eyes scanned the surroundings. This was their first shared step into a deeper part of the world, and Gary sensed their bond strengthening simply by standing together in this unfamiliar environment. He moved slowly, allowing his partner time to adapt, knowing that patience would be more important than haste in this setting. As they proceeded along the winding forest path, Gary remained attuned to the subtle signs around him. The forest was alive with delicate noises, the rustle of leaves, the snapping of small twigs beneath tiny feet, the distant call of a Pidgeotto soaring above the canopy. Caterpies inched along branches, their segmented bodies moving with gentle coordination. Weedles clung to tree trunks, blending seamlessly into the bark. Occasionally, a faint glimmer of movement caught Gary's attention, a hidden Pokémon retreating into tall grass, cautious, yet curious. Gary walked with a steady, unhurried rhythm, allowing the forest to guide his pace. He observed the interplay of light and shadow, noting how certain Pokémon navigated these contrasts with ease. He studied the distribution of plant life, the patterns in the underbrush that indicated frequent wild Pokémon travel, and the subtle shifts in temperature and humidity as they moved deeper into the forest. Every detail added to his growing understanding of how Pokémon adapted to their environments and how trainers needed to adjust their strategies accordingly. Along the way, Gary encountered his first forest-based challenge, a group of wild Pokémon observing him from the trees. Their presence was not hostile, but cautious, testing his awareness. Gary felt his partner tense slightly, not out of fear, but readiness. He recognized the importance of responding calmly, guiding his Pokémon not through aggressive action but through steady confidence. He moved forward with composed intention, demonstrating through his posture and pace that he respected the forest and its inhabitants. The wild Pokémon, sensing no threat, eventually dispersed, allowing Gary to continue deeper along the path. The forest thickened as he progressed, its atmosphere becoming cooler and more immersive. The light shifted to a softer, diffused green, and the sounds of the outside world faded into a distant hum. Gary felt a sense of grounding as he walked, the environment enveloping him in its quiet complexity. He noticed how his partner began adjusting its movements to match the terrain, becoming more attuned to the forest's rhythms with each step. This synergy between trainer and Pokémon reassured Gary, reinforcing the trust that was forming through shared experience. Midway through the forest, Gary reached a small glade where sunlight filtered through in soft golden streams. He chose this place to rest, allowing himself and his partner a moment to breathe and reflect. The forest floor was covered in a thick layer of moss, soft beneath his hands as he settled onto it. The air carried a faint sweetness from blooming forest flowers, their petals shimmering gently in the scattered light. Small bug-type Pokémon moved quietly among the flowers, their buzzing wings blending into a soothing background hum. Gary observed the glade with a serene sense of appreciation. He admired how ecosystems formed intricate balances, each species contributing to the overall harmony. Pokémon here did not simply exist. They interacted, cooperated, and adapted in ways that reflected their environment's needs. The forest was a living classroom, offering lessons that no book or research note could fully capture. Sitting quietly, Gary absorbed the atmosphere, his partner resting at his side, equally calm. As he closed his eyes briefly, he allowed the moment to deepen. His breathing slowed, matching the gentle pulse of the forest. Thoughts drifted through him steadily, reflecting on everything he had learned so far. This journey was proving to be more than a test of strength or ambition. It was a deepening of awareness, an opportunity to expand his perspective. The forest had a way of softening ambition without diminishing it, reminding him that growth required more than determination. It required presence, patience, and the willingness to listen to the environment. When Gary and his partner rose from their rest, they moved forward with renewed connection. The path ahead wound through denser foliage, illuminated occasionally by glowing patches of luminescent mushrooms clinging to fallen logs. The air grew cooler still, carrying the scent of damp earth and ancient wood. Gary found himself navigating through areas where the terrain shifted unexpectedly, sloping dips hidden beneath thick leaves, narrow pathways formed between closely woven tree roots, and pockets of soft ground that required careful footing. Each challenge required awareness, forcing Gary to adjust his pace and strategy. Throughout the remainder of the forest, Gary encountered several wild Pokémon that tested his readiness as a trainer. With each encounter, he guided his partner with calm precision, ensuring that the Pokémon responded not out of instinct alone, but through the growing trust between them. His strategies were subtle, informed by the observations he had made earlier in the forest. He understood how certain Pokémon reacted to movements, how they guarded their territories, and how to avoid unnecessary conflict. The bond between Gary and his partner strengthened with each challenge, forming a quiet language built on shared understanding. As the afternoon stretched into early evening, the forest began to thin. The sounds grew less layered, the light less filtered. Gary recognized the shift intuitively, sensing that he was nearing the forest's edge. He felt a blend of accomplishment and calm settle over him, his steps carrying the quiet confidence of someone who had not only traversed the forest but absorbed its teachings. When he reached the clearing that marked the end of Viridian Forest, he paused to look back. The towering trees, now framed in soft sunset light, stood as guardians of the experience he had just lived. Gary felt gratitude for the forest, its lessons, its challenges, its serenity. He knew that many trainers viewed Viridian Forest as an obstacle, but he saw it as a guide, a place that had shaped his resolve with quiet depth. Beyond the clearing lay the path to Pewter City, its distant buildings catching the last hues of daylight. Gary stepped forward slowly, feeling the subtle shift from wilderness to civilization. His partner moved beside him with steady confidence, their bond now richer than it had been just a day before. As he walked toward Pewter City, Gary felt his journey unfolding with a sense of quiet inevitability. The world was expanding around him, filled with challenges and discoveries he had only begun to experience. He knew that the protagonist was somewhere beyond, making his own way through the forest, or perhaps already stepping into the next phase of his journey. Their paths would cross again soon. He felt it as surely as he felt the steady rhythm of his own breath. The day faded into twilight, and Gary entered the outskirts of Pewter City, its stone buildings glowing softly under the evening sky. The forest behind him felt like a chapter of quiet awakening, one that had strengthened his foundation and deepened his understanding of what it truly meant to be a trainer. His resolve was steady, his confidence calm, and his bond with his partner stronger than ever. The journey continued, guided by purpose, curiosity, and the quiet rhythm of growth. The approach to Pewter City carried a subtle shift in atmosphere that Gary noticed long before he reached its heart. The path leading into the city wound gently between rising stone formations, their surfaces worn smooth by countless seasons of wind and weather. These ancient rocks stood like silent markers of time, layered with stories of trainers who had passed through long before him. The air grew denser with earthy scents, and the last strands of sunlight caught on the pale gray of the surrounding cliffs. Gary felt the transition not only around him, but within him, as though each step into Pewter brought a quiet weight of expectation. He walked with measured calm, taking in the city's design as it revealed itself progressively through the narrowing pathway. Pewter City was built not against nature, but with it, its structures rising alongside the natural stones rather than replacing them. The buildings carried tones of muted grays and soft browns, complementing the environment rather than contrasting it. The city had a grounded, peaceful energy, stable, sturdy, and resilient. Gary felt its presence settle around him like a steadying hand. His partner walked beside him, equally attentive to the new terrain. The Pokémon steps echoed lightly against the stone-paved ground, its posture poised but relaxed. Gary sensed that his partner, too, felt the gravity of this place. Pewter City was known for its disciplined trainers, for battles that tested the foundations of strength, strategy, and trust. There was no unnecessary extravagance here. Instead, Pewter thrived on a culture of quiet perseverance. Gary admired this immediately. As he entered deeper into the city, he absorbed the environment with the analytical awareness he had cultivated over years of observation. The people moved with a purposeful but unhurried rhythm. They carried tools for excavation, tended to geological research instruments, or worked on restoration projects near the surrounding cliffs. Their connection to the land was evident, their expertise shaped not only by study, but by living in close harmony with these formations. Even the Pokémon native to the area moved with a grounded presence. Geodudes resting on boulders, Onyx carving gentle pathways through the ground, their bodies moving like extensions of the earth itself. Gary found himself reflecting on how regions influenced the growth of both trainers and Pokémon. Viridian had offered lessons in adaptability and intuition, while Pewter emphasized stability and endurance. Each city as much a part of the journey as the forests, fields, and mountains that connected them. He appreciated this natural progression, sensing the intentional rhythm that underlined the world he was moving through. Approaching the Pokémon Center, he stepped inside its warm interior and allowed the familiar hum of machinery and soft light to welcome him. After ensuring his partner was rested and fully recovered from their journey through Viridian Forest, Gary stepped outside once more, letting the late twilight wash over him. The city's lights shimmered faintly under the growing dark, casting elongated shadows against the stone. He began walking again, exploring Pewter City with the same quiet curiosity that guided every step of his adventure. The museum stood as one of its most prominent structures, built into the natural stone and blending seamlessly with its surroundings. Gary paused to take in its architecture. The careful layering of stone slabs, the gentle slope of its entrance, the subtle carvings influenced by ancient Pokémon fossils. He felt drawn to it. sensing that this building held pieces of history that would deepen his understanding of the world. Inside, the museum's air was cool and dry, carrying faint traces of dust and preserved minerals. Gary moved slowly through the exhibits, letting his eyes linger on each fossil displayed under soft lighting. The ancient remains of long-extinct Pokémon carried a sense of timelessness, each one holding echoes of a world that no longer existed. Gary felt humbled by the depth of history represented here. The realization that Pokémon had existed through countless ages before humans had ever begun their journeys added a profound dimension to his thoughts. He studied the displays with calm focus, absorbing details about prehistoric Pokémon, their evolutionary paths, and the environmental changes that shaped them. His mind pieced together how these ancient creatures might have navigated their landscapes, how their instincts and abilities evolved to adapt to shifting conditions over millennia. Gary's appreciation for the natural world deepened, and he felt a renewed sense of respect for the vastness of time that lay behind every modern encounter. Leaving the museum, he returned to the quiet streets, now touched by the gentle glow of night. Lamps cast soft halos of light against the stone walk, and the distant silhouettes of the surrounding cliffs blended into the sky. The city felt more peaceful beneath the stars, the usual movement of people slowing to a tranquil rhythm. Gary welcomed the stillness, allowing it to settle over him like a blanket. Walking toward the training grounds near the outskirts of the city, Gary encountered an open area carved naturally between stone ridges. The ground was worn smooth by countless battles, its surface a mixture of compacted earth and scattered dust. He stood at the edge of the field, observing the way the moonlight touched the stone, creating soft gradients of shadow and light. The quiet space invited reflection more than action. Gary released his partner once more, watching as the Pokémon stretched and scanned the surroundings. The air here carried a subtle electricity, not literal, but a sense of potential, as though this field had absorbed the determination of every trainer who had stood here before him. Gary felt that energy resonate within him, though he kept his breathing slow, his thoughts steady. He focused on training, not as a battle, but as a form of communication. He guided his partner through precise movements, encouraging balance, endurance, and awareness rather than sheer power. Each instruction was delivered calmly, every gesture slow and deliberate. The Pokémon responded with growing clarity, its motion strengthening as it mirrored the pace Gary established. The session unfolded like a quiet conversation. There were no words, only intention and response, movement and adjustment. Gary's bond with his partner deepened through the simplicity of practice. He understood that true strength emerged not from force, but from unity, trainer and Pokémon acting as extensions of each other's purpose. As the night progressed, Gary paused occasionally to study the cliffs that surrounded the training grounds. He imagined the protagonist somewhere beyond these stone ridges, perhaps entering the city or resting after his own journey through the forest. The idea of their parallel paths gave Gary a sense of quiet companionship, even without direct interaction. Their rivalry was not rooted in hostility, but in shared growth, each pushing the other to rise higher. Gary valued this unspoken connection more deeply than he often admitted, even to himself. When the training session concluded, Gary sat on one of the stone outcrops, letting the cool surface press gently against his hands. His partner settled beside him, breathing steadily after their exercise. Together, they observed the night sky, its vast expanse, dotted with stars that shimmered like polished fragments of ancient fossils. Gary reflected on how far he had come since leaving Pallet Town, and how each step had shaped his mindset and his bond with his Pokémon. He thought about Professor Oak, whose teachings had influenced his understanding of the world from the beginning. The professor's emphasis on respecting Pokémon, studying their behaviors, and fostering genuine bonds echoed within Gary's choices. Gary felt grateful for the foundation Oak had given him, recognizing how those principles continued to guide him through each new environment and challenge. As the night deepened, Gary rose from the stone outcrop, his breathing slow and calm. He returned his partner gently to its Pokeball, appreciating the trust they had cultivated. With quiet steps, he made his way back toward the Pokémon Center. the soft glow of the building guiding him through the semi-darkness. Inside, the warm lighting and gentle hum of equipment wrapped him in a sense of safety. Gary took his time settling into a resting space, allowing his mind to unwind naturally. He replayed the day's experiences, entering Pewter City, exploring its museum, training among its stone ridges, and recognized how each moment added to his growth. The journey was expanding not just his skills, but his understanding of himself. Before closing his eyes, Gary acknowledged something quietly within his own thoughts. The protagonist would soon arrive in Pewter City, and their paths would once again converge. He anticipated the moment not with tension, but with a calm sense of purpose. Their journeys intertwined, not by accident, but by design, each serving as a reflection and catalyst for the other's evolution. With that quiet understanding, Gary drifted into sleep, his breathing even, his resolve steady. The stones of Pewter City held him gently, grounding him as the night carried its calm embrace. The journey continued, patient and unfolding, one step into the future at a time. Morning arrived over Pewter City with the quiet certainty of inevitability. Light seeped softly through the clouds, casting muted reflections across stone rooftops and weathered streets. Gary rose with steady calm, feeling the gentle pull of the day ahead. The city, with its rich geological history and enduring sense of balance, seemed to echo his own mindset. Every movement, every breath, carried a purpose grounded in observation, anticipation, and measured preparation. His partner awoke within the Pokeball with a soft click, stretching limbs and flexing wings. Gary watched attentively, noting the subtle shifts in posture, the small signs of readiness that spoke of instinct and comprehension. Their bond had been deepening steadily through each day's experience, and now, standing on the threshold of their first official gym challenge, Gary recognized the quiet intensity of their connection. It was not a connection forged through spectacle or urgency, but through shared calm, careful observation, and unwavering patience. Stepping outside, Gary inhaled the crisp morning air, the subtle scent of stone and earth grounding him. The streets of Pewter City were slowly awakening. A few trainers moved through the city toward their own objectives, while native Pokémon stretched and shifted, brushing the air with gentle movements. Gary's eyes, trained over years of study, picked out patterns within the flow. An alert Rattata darting into a shadow, a small Geodude shifting its weight atop a boulder. He noted each detail, aware that understanding the environment formed an integral part of mastery. The path to the gym lay between the city's sturdy stone buildings, ascending slightly toward the central plaza. Gary's steps were measured, his attention fully present with each footfall. He sensed, without urgency, the rhythm of the city, the subtle shifts in light across the uneven pavement, the quiet resonance of stone meeting stone. He understood instinctively. That preparation for the gym extended beyond strategy and strength. It included patience, observation, and attunement to every facet of the surrounding world. When he arrived at the gym's entrance, Gary paused, studying its facade with a calm attentiveness. Massive stone pillars framed the doorway, weathered over centuries but maintaining an aura of resilience. The air carried the subtle fragrance of rock and mineral, interwoven with faint echoes of past trainers and Pokémon who had ventured within. Gary's hand brushed the surface of the wall, sensing the permanence and gravity of the space. There was no need for words or announcements. The weight of the gym's history was palpable, absorbed silently into the mind and body of anyone who approached. Stepping inside, he observed the interior with deliberate focus. The open space was simple, yet purposeful, designed to test the fundamental abilities of both trainer and Pokémon. Rocks of varying sizes dotted the training area, their arrangement seemingly random but undoubtedly intentional, providing both obstacles and opportunities. The ceiling arched high above, allowing light to diffuse in soft waves. Gary moved carefully across the floor, letting his partner emerge from the Pokeball fully, feeling the energy of the space settle around them. The initial moments in the gym were spent observing. Gary did not rush into confrontation. Instead, he allowed himself to assess the layout, the available space, and the subtle cues of the environment. His partner mirrored this approach, scanning the surroundings, adjusting stance, testing balance, and aligning with the rhythm Gary established. There was no rush, no need for impulse, only steady awareness, which had been cultivated over weeks of travel and careful observation. From the shadows, the gym's Pokémon began to move, not aggressively, but as if testing the waters. Geodudes rolled slightly, their mass shifting gently. Onyx carved measured paths along the perimeter. Gary noted each motion, analyzing tendencies, strengths, and potential strategies without words. The interactions were subtle, a quiet dance of intent and awareness. He guided his partner through this silent assessment, reinforcing attention, adaptability, and the deepening understanding of instinct and environment. The first encounter came naturally, without ceremony. A Geodude shifted, rolling toward the open floor, testing both distance and reaction. Gary remained still, observing the creature's trajectory, its momentum, and the subtle vibrations it caused through the stone floor. He adjusted his posture, signaling through subtle cues for his partner to respond, not with aggression, but with precision. The Pokémon reacted in harmony with Gary's guidance, neutralizing the Geodude's forward motion without unnecessary force, relying on timing, weight distribution, and the subtle modulation of movement. Gary felt the quiet satisfaction of instinct and preparation, converging. Subsequent encounters followed similar patterns. Onyx advanced slowly along a sloped section of the gym, testing reach and endurance. Gary and his partner met it with measured attention, allowing the encounter to unfold as an intricate puzzle of timing, movement, and silent communication. Each step taken was deliberate, each decision informed by observation and careful analysis rather than speed or brute strength. The rhythm of the gym began to embed itself within Gary's consciousness, a gentle lesson in patience, control, and mutual responsiveness. Between these interactions, Gary paused frequently to observe, to allow his partner to rest, and to attune themselves to the subtle energy of the space. The gym was not a place of spectacle, but a crucible in which quiet mastery could emerge. Each challenge was not only physical, but mental, a test of foresight, anticipation, and calm presence. Gary understood that every choice shaped not only the immediate outcome, but the enduring strength of the bond he shared with his partner. Time in the gym passed like a slow, deliberate flow. Light shifted subtly across the floor, creating patterns that influenced movement and perception. The faint sound of stone scraping against stone punctuated the silence, grounding Gary's attention further. His breathing synchronized with the measured pace of both partner and environment, each exhale and inhale reinforcing the steady rhythm necessary for precise execution. As the final encounter approached, Gary felt a subtle tightening of awareness, a focused presence that encompassed both thought and intuition. The last Onyx moved with quiet determination, challenging balance, timing, and adaptability. Gary guided his partner through nuanced shifts in position, movement, and energy. Each adjustment was imperceptible to casual observers, but critical in orchestrating a harmonious interaction. The gym's challenge unfolded not as conflict, but as collaboration. Each participant, trainer, partner, Pokémon, engaged in a complex pattern of awareness and response. When the final movement concluded, Gary stepped back, observing the result with composed satisfaction. His partner, breathing steadily, mirrored his calm confidence. The gym had provided more than a test of strength. It had offered a space in which patience, observation, and deliberate action were the true measures of competence. Gary recognized this deeply, feeling a quiet resonance between what he had learned in preparation and the tangible experience of application. Exiting the gym, Gary paused to allow the soft evening light to wash across Pewter City once more. The stones of the city, warmed faintly by the day's sun, reflected muted hues of orange and gray. He felt the quiet weight of accomplishment, not as triumph over others, but as mastery of understanding, the harmony of knowledge, preparation, and instinct applied with deliberate care. As he walked toward the city's edge, Gary reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The early mornings in Pallet Town, the quiet discipline under Professor Oak's guidance, the measured exploration of Viridian Forest, and the subtle navigation of the gym. Each phase had cultivated a sense of balance within him, shaping not only skill, but temperament. He felt the gentle intertwining of ambition, patience, and perception, and understood that these qualities would continue to guide him through the challenges ahead. The night settled gradually over Pewter, carrying a soft calm. Stars emerged above, punctuating the sky with steady light. Gary returned his partner to its Pokéball, acknowledging the bond that had grown stronger through every shared experience of the day. Together, they moved into the Pokémon Center, allowing the familiar warmth and safety of the space to envelop them. Gary's mind, quiet and reflective, traced the parallel path of the protagonist, who was surely navigating challenges of his own. Their intertwined journeys continued, though separated by distance and circumstance, shaping each boy in ways subtle yet profound. The sense of quiet rivalry, mutual elevation, and complementary growth remained a steady undercurrent beneath every step Gary took. Lying in the Pokémon Center, Gary allowed sleep to come without resistance. The day's experiences, the gym, the stone ridges, the careful coordination with his partner, blended into a steady rhythm of accomplishment and introspection. He felt anchored by preparation, inspired by the world, and connected deeply to the quiet unfolding of his journey. As eyelids closed and breathing evened, Gary embraced the night with calm assurance. The journey continued, deliberate and unfolding, one measured step at a time. Every moment, every choice, every observation added to a foundation of resilience, patience, and understanding. A rhythm of growth as natural and steady as the stones of Pewter City themselves. The morning that followed the gym challenge dawned with soft clarity over Pewter City. Sunlight filtered gently through scattered clouds, illuminating stone rooftops, narrow streets, and the faint shimmer of distant hills beyond the city's boundaries. Gary awoke slowly, feeling the calm weight of reflection from the day before. The gym had offered more than the promise of achievement. It had provided a quiet lesson in patience, strategy, and the intricate interplay between trainer and Pokémon. Every breath he drew carried that understanding, settling in his chest as a reminder of the depth of preparation required for the journey ahead. Stepping outside, Gary inhaled the cool morning air, letting the scent of stone, earth, and early vegetation fill him with calm focus. His partner emerged from its Pokéball, stretching and flexing in the soft light. The Pokémon's movements carried a quiet confidence now, a reflection of the harmony that had begun to form between them. Gary acknowledged the subtle shift in their dynamic. Trust was no longer simply an anticipation of obedience, but an awareness of shared intent. Their bond was becoming a language of action and perception, silent yet profound, reinforcing every decision with the resonance of mutual understanding. As he prepared to depart Pewter City, Gary observed the landscape that stretched toward the horizon. The city gave way to rugged paths, gentle slopes, and stretches of grass that led to unfamiliar terrain. The air was filled with the subtle chorus of morning Pokémon awakening, the distant rustle of leaves, and the soft hum of the wind brushing against rock formations. Each sound, each movement, offered a quiet invitation to attune himself further to the world around him. Gary moved deliberately, letting his pace mirror the rhythm of his surroundings. The first steps beyond the city carried a distinct sensation. Unlike the structured stone of Pewter or the dense layered greens of Viridian Forest, this new path was open and expansive, its contours less predictable, its features subtle and varied. Gary recognized that the journey ahead would require a new form of awareness, one that blended the careful observation he had cultivated with adaptability and an intuitive understanding of subtle environmental cues. He welcomed this challenge, feeling a quiet thrill in the subtle uncertainty of it. Walking along the winding path, Gary noticed the variety of wild Pokémon inhabiting the area. Small Pidgeys and Spearows navigated the open sky, their flight patterns shifting with the currents of air. Weedles and Caterpies crawled along low shrubs, their movements intricate and deliberate. Gary studied them with careful attention, noting not only their behavior, but the underlying logic of their interactions with each other and the environment. This was a form of learning without urgency, a quiet process of absorption that enriched both his understanding and his awareness of the interconnectedness of life. Midway along the route, he found a gentle rise overlooking the surrounding landscape. He paused, allowing the breadth of view to settle over him. The horizon extended in layers of muted green and soft brown, punctuated by occasional clusters of trees and rocky outcroppings. The air shifted slightly at this elevation, carrying the faint scent of distant water and the subtle coolness of higher terrain. Gary felt the expansive quality of the world press upon him, not as pressure, but as possibility. Each step beyond this point represented not simply physical progress, but a deeper exploration of the intricate rhythm of life, both natural and trained. Releasing his partner from its Pokéball, Gary allowed the Pokémon to adjust to the open expanse. Its movements were fluid, instinctively scanning for cues in the environment, testing the terrain beneath its feet. Gary followed with deliberate attention, observing the subtle shifts in posture, the tension in muscles, the alignment of senses with surroundings. This was a continuation of their evolving partnership, a rehearsal of harmony that extended beyond structured training into the quiet orchestration of movement and awareness. The day progressed slowly, each step marked by careful observation and reflection. Gary encountered several wild Pokémon along the path. Rattata skittering between stones, Nidorans peering cautiously from underbrush, and even the occasional Geodude rolling gently in open patches of earth. Every interaction was approached with calm deliberation. Rather than force or haste, Gary relied on nuanced adjustments, timing, and the silent communication he had cultivated with his partner. The exercises reinforced not only strength and skill, but attentiveness, patience, and the subtle flow of trust. As afternoon approached, Gary paused beside a gently flowing stream that cut through the landscape. Water rippled over smooth stones, carrying reflections of light across its surface in shifting patterns. Small Magikarp leapt intermittently, their movements stirring ripples that echoed along the banks. Gary knelt beside the stream, letting the ambient sound settle his thoughts, allowing the movement of water to synchronize with the quiet rhythm of his breathing. This pause was not mere rest. It was an exercise in perception, reflection, and awareness. It reminded him that the journey's value lay as much in the moments of observation as in the moments of action. He allowed his partner to explore the immediate area, noting its curiosity and cautious engagement with the environment. Gary observed without interference, appreciating the subtle learning that occurred naturally. He recognized the parallel between his own observation and that of his Pokémon. Both required patience, focus, and the willingness to absorb rather than act impulsively. This shared understanding reinforced the silent dialogue between them, deepening their bond and honing their collective presence. Moving forward, after this interlude, Gary encountered a gently wooded area, where tall grass and thin trees created a mosaic of shadows across the path. The terrain demanded careful navigation, balancing steady footing with alertness to the subtle cues of Pokémon movement and environmental shifts. Here, Gary's training and observational skills converged, allowing him to navigate effectively while maintaining an awareness of potential encounters. Every glance, every shift in weight, every adjustment of posture was an exercise in harmonizing with the landscape and the life it supported. A quiet encounter emerged as a small flock of Spearow glided above, their wings slicing through the dappled light. Gary's partner instinctively adjusted its movements, mirroring the attentiveness he maintained. This synchrony was subtle, almost imperceptible to outside observers, yet vital to the seamless progression of trainer and Pokémon through dynamic situations. Gary understood that such responsiveness, grounded in patience and observation, formed the true foundation of competency in the broader world of Pokémon. As the sun began its descent, casting a warm orange glow across the terrain, Gary reached a gentle rise that provided a panoramic view of the surrounding landscape. Beyond the immediate path, forests and fields stretched toward the horizon, interspersed with hints of distant settlements. The depth of the world struck him profoundly. Every ridge, every shadowed valley, every glint of water hinted at experiences yet to come. This perspective evoked a quiet humility, a sense of the vastness of life and the layered complexity of the journey he had chosen. Resting briefly at this vantage, Gary considered the continuous influence of the protagonist, whose parallel journey moved forward just as deliberately. Though separated by distance, their trajectories mirrored and intersected in subtle ways, each learning and evolving through the unseen. pressure of rivalry and shared ambition. The quiet tension of their intertwined growth shaped Gary's own perspective, adding a sense of continuity and relational depth to his independent progression. As dusk approached, Gary allowed the path to guide him toward a sheltered area near the edge of a small wooded knoll. He released his partner, letting it explore and settle before night fell. The forested area offered cover and safety, softened by shadows and the gentle rustle of leaves. Gary felt the calm depth of the moment, the intertwining of safety, awareness, and quiet anticipation for the continuation of his journey. Under the emerging stars, Gary observed the nocturnal rhythm of the forest. Tiny movements in the underbrush indicated the activity of small Pokémon, insects, and other creatures. Each sound and shadow was noted with measured attention, training his mind to remain present even in subtle and shifting conditions. The silence of night carried a depth of information, often overlooked, emphasizing awareness over reaction, perception over impulse. He felt the quiet expansion of understanding that comes from immersion in an environment, a realization of the continuous lessons embedded within every detail of life. As he prepared for sleep, Gary reflected on the layered experiences of the day, from the streets of Pewter City to the open expanses beyond, from careful observation of wild Pokémon to mindful interactions with his partner. Each moment, deliberate or subtle, contributed to the shaping of skill, perception, and the quiet patience necessary to navigate a world filled with life, unpredictability, and opportunity. He felt grounded in the rhythm of his journey, aware that every step forward, every observation, every choice was weaving a continuous path of growth and understanding. Lying beneath the shelter of the trees, Gary returned his partner to its Pokeball for the night, sensing the warmth and steady presence of their connection. The bowl, stars above shimmered faintly through breaks in the canopy, their gentle light reflected on the leaves and the soft contours of the earth. Gary closed his eyes, breathing evenly, allowing the calm of night and the knowledge of progression to settle through him. The journey continued, expansive yet measured, each step blending observation, patience, and deliberate motion into a quiet rhythm of growth. The world beyond Pewter City stretched outward in layered paths and subtle lessons, guiding Gary with both challenge and serenity. Within this rhythm, the bond with his partner deepened, awareness sharpened, and the sense of interconnectedness between trainer, Pokémon, and environment became ever more profound. With breathing steady, mind attentive, and spirit attuned to the quiet unfolding of experience, Gary allowed sleep to take him fully. The journey of discovery, discipline, and harmony would resume with the rising sun, each new day offering the subtle expansion of horizons, the deepening of skill, and the silent shaping of mastery that only time, patience, and care could cultivate. The morning light arrived gently over the rolling hills beyond Pewter City, casting soft shadows across the slopes and illuminating the delicate sways of the tall grasses that covered the landscape. Gary rose with the quiet awareness that each new day held both familiarity and subtle transformation. The journey beyond Pewter, into open terrain and wandering paths, demanded attention not only to skill, but to intuition. The hills whispered their own lessons through every rustling leaf, every bird call, and every hidden movement among the grass. Gary inhaled deeply, letting the sense of earth and vegetation fill his lungs, grounding him in the moment. His partner emerged from its Pokeball, stretching and flexing as sunlight kissed its skin. Gary observed the motions carefully, noting the precise shifts in posture, the subtle readiness in the eyes, and the way the creature aligned itself with the surroundings. This was no longer simple responsiveness. It was mutual attunement. Every step, every glance, every deliberate action carried a silent understanding of rhythm and balance between trainer and Pokémon. The hills stretched before them like a quiet expanse of possibilities, each rise and valley an invitation to explore the subtle mechanics of movement, awareness, and perception. As they began their ascent into the first slope, the terrain shifted in texture. The soft grass became interspersed with patches of exposed earth, small clusters of stones, and gentle ridges formed over time by the elements. Gary moved slowly, each step placed with care, his eyes scanning the ground for subtle irregularities and signs of nearby Pokémon activity. He noted the tiny disturbances left by previous travelers, the faint impressions of claws on soft soil, the occasional shift in grass that indicated a concealed presence. Observation had become a second nature, an invisible rhythm guiding his every motion. The hills themselves seemed alive in quiet ways. A gentle wind swept across the slopes, bending grasses in rolling waves, carrying the faint scent of distant flowers and fresh earth. Birds moved in coordinated flutters, their calls echoing softly against the undulating terrain. Small mammals scuttled briefly into burrows, leaving fleeting impressions behind. Gary registered these signs with calm attentiveness, recognizing that the environment itself offered continuous instruction in adaptation, patience, and anticipation. The hills spoke not in words, but in patterns, timing, and subtle shifts, and Gary attuned himself fully to the language. Encounters with wild Pokémon emerged naturally along the path. A pair of Rattata darted between stones, their movements rapid but deliberate. A nearby flock of Pidgey circled lazily above, shifting in response to wind currents and hidden disturbances. Gary guided his partner through each encounter with gentle precision, reinforcing the principles of coordination and observation they had cultivated over previous days. Every adjustment, how to shift weight, when to pivot, how to gauge distance, was delivered without haste, without urgency, and received with quiet trust. Each moment deepened their partnership, reinforcing the rhythm of anticipation, movement, and harmony. Midway through the morning, Gary discovered a secluded hollow where the grasses thinned, revealing small clusters of rocks arranged almost naturally into stepping points and observation posts. He paused to allow both himself and his partner a moment of reflection. The air was cool, carrying the faint murmur of insects and the distant song of a passing Pidgeotto. Sunlight filtered softly through intermittent breaks in the clouds, casting shifting patterns across the landscape. Gary let his breathing synchronize with the subtle rhythm of the environment, each inhale and exhale echoing the gentle pulse of the hills themselves. The hollow became a quiet stage for deliberate practice. Gary guided his partner through slow, deliberate movements, testing balance over uneven terrain, adjusting coordination between step and glance, tuning instincts to respond with calm deliberation rather than impulsive reaction. The exercises were not about confrontation or speed. They were about cultivating awareness, timing, and subtle decision-making. Each adjustment reinforced trust, each pause honed perception, and each movement deepened the silent conversation between trainer and Pokémon. As the day progressed, the path wound upward into increasingly undulating hills. The terrain demanded subtle recalibrations: how to approach a ridge without losing balance, how to anticipate sudden dips, how to respond to Pokémon hidden among tall grass or partially obscured rocks. Gary noticed the faintest cues of movement, shifts in shadow, tiny deviations in the sway of foliage, the sound of rustling hidden beneath the breeze. These observations became part of a continuous feedback loop, reinforcing an ongoing dialogue between himself, his partner, and the living environment. During a particularly gentle ascent, Gary paused atop a smooth, rounded hillock. From this vantage, he could see the patchwork of the hills stretching outward, a tapestry of shadows and light, of slopes and hidden valleys. The beauty was subtle, but profound. Beyond the immediate path, the hills unfolded endlessly, suggesting both challenge and opportunity, each contour offering a new lesson in movement, perception, and adaptation. Gary allowed his eyes to rest on this panorama, letting the quiet expansiveness of the world deepen his own sense of patience and awareness. Encounters with wild Pokémon continued along the slopes. Pidgey, Spearow, and Nidoran moved with fluid grace, sometimes approaching out of curiosity, sometimes retreating with caution. Gary met each encounter without urgency, guiding his partner with subtle hand motions, calm presence, and quiet intention. The Pokémon responded intuitively, adapting their movement to his guidance, reinforcing the silent symphony of collaboration that had become a constant undercurrent of the journey. No victory was measured in speed or aggression, but in synchronization, observation, and mutual understanding. As the afternoon sun shifted across the sky, the hill's textures changed gradually. Small clusters of trees emerged, their trunks slender and leaves delicate, casting gentle shadows over the grasses. Streams of water occasionally cut through the terrain, their presence indicated by the slight lushness of nearby plants and the quiet hum of insects. Gary noted each variation, adjusting his pace and strategy to harmonize with the subtleties of environment and terrain. Awareness was not simply a cognitive process, but a physical rhythm, each motion guided by perception, anticipation, and reflection. Pausing briefly by one such stream, Gary knelt to observe the water's movement, noting how its flow shaped the surrounding earth and vegetation. Tiny Pokémon interacted with the edges, Magikarp leaping occasionally, Poliwag hovering near the bank, each action a small lesson in balance, response, and environmental adaptation. Gary allowed his partner a moment to explore these microcosms of life, reinforcing calm observation, subtle responsiveness, and the quiet joy of discovery. The world offered continuous instruction, requiring only attention and patience to absorb its lessons. The journey continued into the late afternoon, the hills rolling gently beneath their steady progress. Gary observed the interdependence of terrain, vegetation, and wild Pokémon behavior, noting how each element informed the movement and strategy of both trainer and partner. The slopes offered gentle challenges. The hidden valleys provided opportunities for testing, agility, and awareness. And the subtle wind patterns shaped instinctual adjustments. Every moment reinforced the delicate harmony of perception, action, and silent communication. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky with soft gradients of gold and pink, Gary reached a higher ridge, offering a broad view of the path ahead. The distant horizon promised further challenges and discoveries, from deeper valleys to the approaching forests beyond. The hills themselves seemed to exhale with quiet welcome, guiding him forward with gentle encouragement. Gary allowed the breadth of the vista to settle over him, grounding him in the present while offering insight into the subtle flow of the journey ahead. Finding a quiet hollow at the ridge's crest, Gary allowed his partner to rest and adjust to the cooler evening air. Together, they observed the faint movements of nocturnal creatures beginning to emerge. Small rustlings, fleeting shadows, and the soft hum of insects signaled the transition from day to night. Gary noted each shift with steady calm, reinforcing awareness and attention as constant companions in every step of the journey. The hills, alive with gentle motion and quiet energy, became a sanctuary of reflection and preparation for the path ahead. As stars emerged gradually above, the world softened into muted hues of shadow and light. Gary guided his partner back into its Pokeball with quiet care, sensing the deepening trust and connection that had grown steadily through hours of shared observation and movement. The hills around them whispered softly, a chorus of wind, rustling grass, and distant water, carrying lessons of patience, rhythm, and subtle adaptability. Gary allowed himself to absorb the tranquility, recognizing that these moments of reflection were as critical as any physical training or encounter. Lying down to rest beneath a gently overhanging rock, Gary watched the stars shimmer faintly above. Each one seemed like a beacon of distant possibility, a quiet reminder that the journey was continuous, layered, and evolving. With his breathing steady and his mind attuned to the silent rhythms of the hills, Gary allowed sleep to arrive. Naturally, carrying with him the insights, awareness, and deepened bond with his partner cultivated throughout the day. The journey continued, expansive yet deliberate, a quiet unfolding of perception, patience, and experience. The hills beyond Pewter offered not merely passage but subtle instruction, each step building skill, awareness, and understanding. The path stretched forward, carrying the promise of further challenge, growth, and discovery, all within the gentle rhythm of the world and the serene flow of the trainer's journey. As dawn brushed its first gentle light across the horizon, Gary rose to the soft chorus of morning from the hills he had spent the previous day traversing. The grasses swayed in the early wind, carrying with them the subtle scent of earth and dew, a quiet reminder of the world's persistent rhythm. Gary moved slowly, deliberately, allowing his senses to attune to the nuances of light, temperature, and movement in the surrounding terrain. The journey toward Cerulean City had begun in earnest, yet the path held more than distance. It held subtle lessons in perception, patience, and the quiet expansion of skill. His partner emerged from its Pokeball, stretching and flexing in response to the cool morning air. The creature's movements were measured, grounded, and precise. Gary observed the details, the alignment of limbs, the subtle shifts in weight, the keen focus in the eyes. This was no longer mere readiness for travel. It was an expression of mutual understanding and trust. A step they would take together, every adjustment in pace, every interaction with the environment, was a continuation of a rhythm they had cultivated over time. A silent dialogue expressed through movement, awareness, and instinct. The path forward stretched across rolling lowlands, interspersed with patches of wildflowers and clusters of small trees. Each contour, each rise and dip in the terrain, demanded careful observation. Gary scanned for signs of Pokémon activity, noting the faint impressions left in soft soil, the slight bend of grass where small creatures had passed, and the occasional distant shadow hinting at the presence of larger Pokémon. These details, seemingly minute, formed a living map of the environment, guiding each step with intuitive precision. As they moved, Gary allowed his mind to reflect on the rhythm of his journey thus far. Viridian Forest had taught him subtlety, awareness, and the depth of environmental observation. Pewter City had shown him patience, stability, and the grounding influence of structured challenge. The rolling hills beyond had offered perspective, expansion, and the quiet sharpening of coordination and perception. Each phase unfolded naturally, building not only skill, but a profound understanding of the interplay between trainer, partner, and the living world around them. Gary felt a quiet satisfaction in recognizing the continuity and depth of these experiences. Along the way, wild Pokémon revealed themselves in gentle, organic ways. A pair of Spearow glided above, adjusting their flight in response to shifting wind currents. Small Rattata scurried across patches of soft soil, pausing momentarily to observe intrusions into their territory before disappearing into tall grass. Gary guided his partner with minimal motion, subtle signals of presence and direction, reinforcing attentiveness, timing, and responsive movement. The encounters were not confrontational. They were exercises in harmony, allowing instincts, perception, and shared understanding to unfold naturally. Mid-morning brought them to a shallow stream cutting through the lowland terrain. Water rippled over stones, carrying reflections of soft sunlight, and the faint calls of aquatic Pokémon could be heard among reeds along the banks. Gary knelt beside the water, observing its flow, the interaction of currents and stones, the small vibrations caused by life beneath its surface. His partner mirrored his calm attentiveness, exploring the immediate area with curiosity yet careful caution. Together, they absorbed the subtle teachings of the stream, the gentle reminder that even in motion, equilibrium existed, and mastery required observation, not haste. Continuing their journey, Gary guided his partner through the undulating terrain toward a distant rise. Shadows shifted across the landscape as clouds moved lazily overhead, creating patterns of light and dark that changed with every step. These shifts affected perception, movement, and awareness, demanding adaptive attentiveness. Gary noted how small adjustments, balancing weight differently, altering pace, fine-tuning gaze and attention, enhanced their response to the living environment. Each adjustment, subtle and deliberate, reinforced the ongoing dialogue between trainer and partner. By midday, they reached a gentle plateau, offering an expansive view of the route ahead. Cerulean City rested beyond a thin ribbon of trees and open fields, its buildings faintly illuminated by the mid-morning sun. The sight evoked both anticipation and calm reflection in Gary. Progress toward the next destination carried a tangible sense of purpose, yet he remained mindful that the journey itself was equally significant. The environment had shaped him as much as the experiences along the way. Observation, patience, and coordination had become as vital as instinct or speed. The plateau provided a brief respite, allowing for hydration, reflection, and quiet preparation. Gary released his partner, observing as it stretched and explored, reinforcing the subtle responsiveness they had cultivated over weeks of shared experience. The Pokémon's movements were fluid and precise, an extension of the awareness Gary had nurtured. Together, they rested in quiet communion with the landscape, attuning to the whispers of wind, the hum of insects, and the distant sounds of wildlife moving through the trees and grasses. Descending from the plateau, the path became slightly more complex, winding among intermittent thickets, shallow ditches, and the occasional exposed stone. Each step demanded mindful attention, adjusting pace and trajectory to maintain balance while anticipating the presence of hidden or camouflaged Pokémon. Gary's practice was a subtle choreography of perception and movement, recognizing patterns, interpreting environmental cues, and responding in calm, measured synchrony with his partner. The rhythm of their journey became increasingly internalized, a quiet pulse guiding every decision and adjustment. Encounters with wild Pokémon continued organically. A small group of Nidoran foraged near the undergrowth, their movements cautious, yet persistent. Gary guided his partner with deliberate precision, emphasizing the timing of steps, weight shifts, and the subtle expression of intent. No confrontation occurred. Instead, the interaction served as continuous reinforcement of coordination, awareness, and the silent dialogue forming between trainer and Pokémon. Each movement, each breath, and each adjustment contributed to a growing reservoir of calm competence and responsiveness. As afternoon shifted toward evening, shadows lengthened across the fields. Gary and his partner approached a stretch of open terrain where gentle wind currents carried the faint scent of water, hinting at a nearby river feeding into Cerulean's surroundings. Here, the openness demanded expanded awareness, the subtle pressures of wind, slight variations in terrain, the faint signals of hidden life, all required attentive interpretation. Gary adjusted his pace and stance, guiding his partner to align with the rhythm of the environment, reinforcing the principles of observation, anticipation, and coordinated response. The approach to the edge of the lowlands brought the distant sight of a river winding toward Cerulean City, its surface glinting softly in the evening light. Gary paused, allowing a moment to absorb the quiet beauty of the scene. The gentle movement of water, the interplay of wind and vegetation, and the faint calls of distant Pokémon. This pause, deliberate and unhurried, reinforced the principles of reflection, patience, and awareness that had guided the journey thus far. The world was not a series of obstacles, but a continuous teacher offering insight through every sound, movement, and shift in perspective. As dusk settled, Gary guided his partner to a small grove of trees near the riverbank. The space offered shelter, a quiet environment to prepare for the night, and a place to reflect on the day's progress. He allowed his partner time to explore, observing movements and posture with careful attention, reinforcing mutual trust and responsiveness. The grove became a sanctuary of quiet learning, where the balance between observation and motion, anticipation and reflection, was practiced as naturally as breathing. Nightfall draped the landscape in muted shades of blue and gray, with the river reflecting faint starlight and the occasional shimmer of nocturnal creatures moving through the underbrush. Gary returned his partner to its Pokeball, sensing the calm resonance of connection that had deepened throughout the day. He settled beneath the gentle shelter of the grove, letting the quiet pulse of the hills, the wind, and the river guide his own breathing and awareness. The journey, expansive and deliberate, continued to unfold in layered rhythms, each step observation and interaction reinforcing skill, patience, and trust. As he closed his eyes, Gary allowed the gentle cadence of the natural world to lull him into calm repose. The stars overhead, faintly shimmering through gaps in foliage, marked the continuity of the journey, expansive, rhythmic, and rich with quiet instruction. Sleep arrived naturally, a gentle interlude in the continuous flow of movement, observation, and reflection. The edge of Cerulean City loomed ahead, a subtle beacon of next steps, challenges, and opportunities. Yet the focus remained on presence, patience, and the deepening awareness cultivated with every passing moment. The journey continued, deliberate, expansive, and steady, a rhythm shaped by environment, connection, and careful attention. Each day brought growth, each step reinforced trust, and each observation strengthened understanding. a seamless weaving of trainer, Pokémon, and the living, breathing world through which they traveled together. The morning unfolded quietly over the outskirts of Cerulean City, its gentle light spilling across the winding river that carved its way through soft green banks and distant hills. Gary awoke beneath the canopy of trees he had chosen for shelter, allowing the cool, crisp air to fill his lungs and the muted sounds of distant Pokémon to settle his senses. The flowing water nearby offered a steady rhythm, soft yet persistent, a subtle guide for his own movements and thoughts. Each breath he took seemed in harmony with the gentle pulse of the environment, grounding him as he prepared for the next phase of the journey. His partner emerged with slow, deliberate motions, stretching and flexing, attuning to the morning's freshness and the environment's gentle rhythm. Gary observed every subtle movement, the adjustment of weight, the minor shifts in stance, the faint focus in the eyes. This ritual of awakening had become a shared experience, reinforcing trust and awareness without the need for sound or word. The bond between trainer and Pokémon had deepened into an almost imperceptible flow of understanding, a silent synchronization that guided every step along the path. As they began their descent toward the riverbank, Gary noted the soft interplay of light on the water's surface, the gentle rustling of reeds, and the subtle ripple patterns that shifted with wind and flow. Small Magikarp leapt from the water at intervals, their bodies catching sunlight in fleeting glimmers. Poliwag moved along the shallow edges, delicate waves trailing behind their movement. Every detail contributed to a quiet, continuous lesson, an immersion in observation and perception. Gary absorbed it all without rush, allowing his mind to dwell in the subtle nuances of the world around him. The path along the river offered gentle challenges, uneven soil, occasional exposed rocks, and slight changes in elevation. Gary adjusted his steps, his posture, and his focus in response to these nuances, guiding his partner with careful gestures and calm presence. Every movement became part of a quiet dialogue, a symphony of awareness and responsiveness. The river itself served as a teacher, demonstrating patience and continuity through the slow, inevitable shaping of the land and the steady rhythm of its flow. Wild Pokémon continued to appear along the banks. A pair of Pidgey drifted overhead, adjusting to currents and each other's movements. A lone Tentacool floated near the shallow edge, its presence barely noticeable but perceptible to a trained eye. Gary guided his partner through interactions with minimal intervention, emphasizing observation, timing, and coordinated responses. These encounters were exercises in subtlety, reinforcing not brute strength but refined awareness, patience, and the capacity to move in harmony with the environment. By midday, Gary reached a slightly elevated section of riverbank, where the flow widened and deepened. He paused to observe, noting how the water's movement influenced nearby vegetation, soil moisture, and the activity of local Pokémon. Small ripples indicated movement beneath the surface. Subtle shifts in currents suggested hidden passages, and the gentle lapping against stone marked the river's constant energy. Gary allowed the complexity to settle into his perception, reinforcing an intuitive understanding of interconnected systems, cause and effect, and the quiet impact of observation. He guided his partner through a series of deliberate exercises along the bank. Movements were slow and precise, shifting weight to maintain balance on uneven soil, adjusting foot placement to accommodate gentle inclines, and coordinating timing to respond to Pokémon cues or environmental subtleties. Each exercise emphasized the interplay between awareness and action, cultivating a calm but responsive flow of movement and understanding. The river's persistent pulse served as both anchor and inspiration, a gentle reminder of continuity and resilience. As afternoon progressed, Gary noticed the subtle shift of light across the water, painting reflections in warm, muted tones. Shadows stretched from distant rocks and trees, altering patterns of perception and influencing the approach of nearby Pokémon. Gary adjusted his attention and movement accordingly, guiding his partner to remain attuned to these shifts. Observation, patience, and adaptation were the constant threads woven throughout each step, each breath, and each interaction. Nothing was hurried. Everything unfolded naturally, as if the river itself dictated the pace of learning. A cluster of small hills rose along the riverbank, offering a vantage point for reflection. Gary ascended slowly, observing the subtle differences in terrain and the gentle patterns created by wind on the grass. From this elevation, the expanse of the river, the distant city, and the surrounding landscape revealed the layered complexity of the journey. The hills and water were not merely obstacles or scenery, but instruments for deepening awareness, teaching lessons in rhythm, perception, and patience. Gary inhaled deeply, letting the serenity and order of the natural world settle into his consciousness. At the top of the rise, he paused to allow his partner time to rest and explore. The Pokémon's movements were fluid yet careful, aligning with the subtle cues in the environment. Gary noted posture, gaze, and the nuanced ways his partner responded to unseen cues, reinforcing a silent yet profound communication. Observation of these behaviors provided lessons in trust, timing, and responsiveness. Each instance subtly deepening the unspoken bond between trainer and Pokémon. As evening approached, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the landscape and reflecting softly on the river's surface. Gary allowed the warm glow to infuse the surroundings with gentle calm, emphasizing reflection and observation over movement, or action. The Pokémon resting nearby mirrored his serene focus, exhaling slowly and maintaining alertness without tension. Together, they existed within a rhythm shaped by the river, the land, and the quiet lessons of a day spent moving thoughtfully through the world. Before settling for the night, Gary released his partner briefly to explore a small cluster of reeds and shallow pools near the river's edge. Every movement was subtle and deliberate, emphasizing the continued cultivation of perception, patience, and attunement. The Pokémon responded intuitively, maintaining careful balance and focus, reinforcing the ongoing silent dialogue that had become the core of their shared journey. Observation and responsiveness, more than action, defined this period of learning. Nightfall draped the landscape in muted tones, and the river reflected the first glimmers of starlight. Small nocturnal creatures began to move along the banks, their rustling creating a gentle symphony that complemented the flowing water. Gary guided his partner to rest, sensing the trust, connection, and calm awareness that had developed over countless shared steps. Together, they absorbed the quiet pulse of the world around them, reinforcing the steady rhythm of preparation, observation, and mutual understanding. As he lay beneath a gently overhanging tree, Gary reflected on the continuity of his journey. From Viridian to Pewter, through rolling hills, and now along Cerulean's river, every phase had strengthened perception, patience, and the bond between trainer and Pokémon. Every environment offered subtle instruction. The forests taught attentiveness, the city provided grounding, the hills expanded perspective, and the river revealed flow and rhythm. Each day, each step, each breath became a thread in the continuous tapestry of growth. The stars above shimmered faintly through gaps in foliage, echoing the constancy of the river's movement below. Gary allowed sleep to come without resistance, trusting the rhythm of his breathing, the quiet trust of his partner, and the ongoing flow of the natural world to guide him. The journey continued, deliberate, measured, and expansive, shaped by observation, patience, and the deepening awareness of life's subtle patterns. Every step taken, every breath, every quiet moment reinforced the continuous unfolding of skill, insight, and harmony. In the gentle darkness, with the river's soft pulse beneath and the stars above, Gary embraced the calm continuity of the journey. He felt anchored in the present, yet aware of the layers of progression that stretched behind and ahead. Each movement, each observation, each interaction reinforced the rhythm of understanding, shaping both trainer and Pokémon as inseparable participants in a quiet, flowing symphony of growth. Sleep carried him gently into the night, preparing mind and body for the next unfolding chapter of adventure. Morning arrived softly over Cerulean City, bathing its familiar streets and flowing river in muted light. Gary awoke with the quiet awareness that each day held subtle lessons woven into its rhythm. The city's energy was present yet restrained, a balance of movement, reflection, and opportunity. From the soft ripple of the river to the gentle sway of trees along its banks, every detail offered insight into timing, observation, and the delicate coordination between trainer, partner, and environment. Gary rose, allowing the gentle cadence of the morning to align with his breath and movements. His partner emerged with smooth, deliberate motions, stretching and flexing as sunlight warmed its form. Gary studied every shift in stance, the subtle adjustments of balance, the careful alignment of perception and intention. Their bond was now a seamless flow of understanding, where each movement mirrored thought and observation. The journey toward Cerulean Gym had taught patience, harmony, and the deep rhythm of connection, and each day's quiet exercises reinforced these principles. The path to the city center unfolded across gentle slopes and low-lying fields, bordered by patches of wildflowers and soft, waving grasses. Gary moved with deliberate care, observing the faint impressions left by passing Pokémon, the subtle disturbances in soil, and the interplay of light and shadow across the terrain. Each observation informed his steps, guiding both him and his partner with quiet precision. Awareness was now as essential as motion. Every step was measured, intentional, and harmonized with the environment. The morning unfolded slowly, inviting reflection on the journey's progress. Gary thought of his past encounters. Viridian Forest had imparted subtle lessons in attentiveness and patience. Pewter City had offered grounding and structured challenge. The hills beyond had cultivated perspective and coordination. Now, approaching Cerulean, he recognized the importance of anticipation and preparation, in tandem with observation. The city's edge carried both promise and the weight of expectation, calling for balance between readiness and calm reflection. Wild Pokémon appeared along the path, their presence subtle and instructive. Pidgey glided effortlessly above, adjusting flight to shifting air currents. A pair of Nidoran moved cautiously among the grass, alert yet persistent in foraging. Gary guided his partner through these encounters with careful attention to timing, weight distribution, and subtle cues of intent. The purpose was never aggression but harmony, reinforcing the ongoing rhythm of observation, responsiveness, and unspoken dialogue between trainer and Pokémon. Mid-morning brought them to a small inlet along the river, where water trickled over smooth stones and formed shallow pools. Gary knelt beside the water, noting the delicate movements of Magikarp beneath the surface, the Poliwag navigating shallow edges, and the gentle vibration of the current. He allowed his partner to explore with mindfulness, reinforcing awareness, coordination, and the instinctive responses that had become second nature. The river's rhythm acted as both teacher and anchor, encouraging patience and deliberate engagement with the immediate environment. As the sun shifted higher, the path toward the gym became more defined, the urban structures of Cerulean City faintly visible across open fields and clusters of trees. Gary observed the interplay of natural and constructed environments. The soft curves of riverbanks meeting stone bridges, shaded groves bordering cobbled streets, and the subtle hum of city life, blending with the rhythms of wildlife. These contrasts required adaptive attention, balancing awareness of natural cues with anticipation of structured human spaces. Gary moved deliberately, internalizing lessons of flexibility and harmony in action. By midday, they reached a gentle rise overlooking the city. From this vantage, Gary absorbed the layered patterns of movement, light, and life. The flowing river reflecting sunlight, the distant streets carrying quiet traffic, and the occasional flutter of wild Pokémon against rooftops and treetops. The scene was instructive, demonstrating the coexistence of multiple rhythms and the need to harmonize observation, timing, and action across varied contexts. Gary allowed the visual complexity to settle into his awareness, reinforcing patience and measured perception. Descending toward the gym, Gary noted the subtle shifts in terrain and the approach of more densely populated areas. Small groups of trainers moved along pathways, each accompanied by Pokémon, their steps carrying patterns of motion, anticipation, and routine. Gary adjusted his pace and posture, maintaining alignment with the rhythm of the environment while preserving the quiet flow of focus that had defined the journey so far. Observation, balance, and anticipation guided every step. Approaching the gym's exterior, Gary paused to absorb its presence. The structure was modest yet purposeful, blending natural stone with practical architecture. Its design reflected not only challenge but also order and structure, inviting careful study rather than impulsive engagement. Gary's partner shifted in alignment with him, mirroring the quiet awareness of the surroundings. Together, they embodied calm attentiveness, ready to engage with the rhythm of the gym without haste or distraction. Inside the gym, the atmosphere was deliberate and measured. Trainers' Pokémon moved with intention across the arena, testing space and observation with controlled adjustments. Gary allowed his partner to emerge fully, attuning to the subtleties of the environment. Every step, every glance, every weight shift was deliberate, reinforcing a pattern of coordination and trust. Observation, responsiveness, and synchronization guided the unfolding interactions, a quiet ballet of awareness that emphasized skill and harmony over confrontation. The initial challenge was subtle. A series of water-type Pokémon shifted across the arena, testing movement, balance, and timing. Gary guided his partner with minimal intervention, adjusting pace, alignment, and attention with gentle gestures. The Pokémon responded intuitively, maintaining fluidity and precision, reinforcing the depth of their unspoken communication. Each movement, each adjustment, and each pause became an exercise in deliberate observation and measured response, deepening the understanding of both environmental cues and partner synchronization. Throughout the morning, Gary navigated the series of encounters with the same patient attention that had defined every day of the journey. Each exercise, each interaction, emphasized harmony, anticipation, and the quiet discipline of refined awareness. The gym offered structured challenge, yet Gary's approach remained guided by calm observation, internal rhythm, and the integration of lessons learned across diverse environments. Skill emerged naturally, shaped by patience and thoughtful engagement, rather than urgency or impulse. As the day progressed, light shifted across the arena, altering perception, shadow, and movement patterns. Gary and his partner adapted seamlessly, demonstrating that mastery was not a static achievement but a dynamic, evolving synchronization with both environment and experience. Each decision, each subtle shift in motion, reinforced calm competence, patience, and the seamless integration of observation with action. Evening descended softly over Cerulean City. Gary guided his partner to rest, allowing a pause for reflection and attunement. The gym, the river, and the surrounding streets carried a quiet resonance, a reminder of the layered rhythm that underpinned the day's challenges. Gary observed the gentle interplay of light, sound, and movement, acknowledging the continuity of experience and the subtle expansion of understanding gained through patient attention and deliberate motion. As stars emerged above, Gary returned his partner to its Pokeball, sensing the quiet trust and connection that had been nurtured throughout the day. Beneath the gentle shelter of a nearby grove, he allowed sleep to come naturally, guided by the continuity of movement, the flow of observation, and the steady rhythm of experience. The journey continued, deliberate, expansive, and rich with subtle lessons. Each step, each breath, and each observation shaping mastery, awareness, and the deepening bond between trainer and Pokémon. Within the soft quiet of the night, Cerulean's river whispered. The trees swayed with measured grace, and the distant hum of the city provided a subtle cadence. Gary allowed these rhythms to envelop him, carrying him into rest, nurturing reflection, patience, and the ongoing flow of growth. The journey moved steadily onward, expansive yet deliberate, a continuum of perception, patience, and harmonious action between trainer, Pokémon, and the living world around them. The morning light arrived over Cerulean City with a gentle clarity, spreading softly across the river, streets, and the distant silhouette of the gym. Gary awoke with a quiet focus, feeling the familiar calm that had become integral to every step of the journey. The rhythm of preparation was embedded in his awareness, observation, anticipation, and subtle responsiveness. Every breath he took aligned with the pulse of the environment, reinforcing the connection between self, partner, and the layers of life that surrounded them. His partner emerged from its Pokeball with deliberate, flowing movements, stretching and flexing as the sun's warmth gently illuminated its form. Gary studied the subtle shifts in posture and balance, noting how instinct, experience, and training converged to create a seamless rhythm of awareness. Their bond was a quiet dialogue, expressed through gesture, motion, and the unspoken coordination of thought and action. Today, facing the gym's structured challenges, that bond would guide their every movement with precision and calm. The path to the gym was lined with cobblestone streets, bordered by clusters of trees and patches of open grass. Light filtered through branches, creating shifting patterns that required attentive observation. Gary moved deliberately, noting each uneven stone, subtle slope, and flicker of movement from nearby Pokémon. Awareness guided every step, shaping posture, balance, and the alignment of his partner's movements. Every minor adjustment reinforced the harmony between observation and action, ensuring that neither speed nor impulsivity disrupted the calm rhythm he had cultivated. Arriving at the gym's entrance, Gary paused to observe its architecture. The stone facade, simple yet purposeful, radiated a quiet authority. The gym was both challenge and teacher, offering a space where observation, patience, and precise execution would be tested. Gary inhaled deeply, allowing the muted sense of stone, water, and vegetation around the entrance to settle him. Each breath reinforced calm presence and focused attention. The gym's history, evident in its structure, carried silent instruction. Every challenge required balance, timing, and awareness, more than force or haste. Inside, the arena unfolded in measured simplicity. Platforms of varying height, shallow water pools, and open spaces offered opportunities for movement, assessment, and interaction. Gary allowed his partner to emerge fully, observing how the Pokémon attuned its stance, balance, and gaze to the space. Each subtle motion was a reflection of instinct, synchronized with deliberate guidance. Gary's movements were equally measured. Weight shifts, gaze alignment, and timing of gesture harmonized with his partner's actions. Together, they created a seamless dialogue of perception and response. The first encounter appeared gently, as if introduced by the arena itself. A small water-type Pokémon shifted across the open pool, testing balance and reaction. Gary guided his partner without overt gestures, emphasizing subtle alignment and timing. The Pokémon responded intuitively, maintaining fluid motion and balance, reinforcing the ongoing rhythm of observation, anticipation, and refined responsiveness. Each interaction emphasized the quiet principles he had learned throughout the journey: patience, presence, and harmonized execution over aggression or speed. Subsequent challenges emerged with deliberate subtlety. Platforms, shallow water areas, and moving Pokémon combined into a fluid sequence, requiring careful attention and adaptive strategy. Gary adjusted each step, gaze, and weight distribution to match the rhythm of the arena and the behavior of his partner. The gym became a living laboratory of motion, perception, and synchronized interaction. Every decision, every small movement, every pause carried significance. The gym demanded the continuous application of observation, patience, precise timing honed over weeks of travel and training. As the day progressed, light shifted across the arena, altering shadow, reflection, and perception. Gary attuned to these subtle changes, adjusting posture, orientation, and responsiveness to maintain harmony between action and environment. The gym's challenges were not obstacles to overcome with force, but nuanced exercises in perception, adaptability, and synchronization. Every movement and interaction became a practice in calm mastery, a reminder that awareness and patience were as critical as skill or strength. Midway through the challenge, Gary guided his partner across a series of shallow pools and uneven platforms. The Pokémon moved with fluid precision, responding to subtle shifts in weight, small gestures, and the gentle rhythm of Gary's presence. The arena itself seemed to respond to their movements, light reflecting differently across water and stone as they navigated each obstacle. Gary's mind remained quiet, yet attentive, fully absorbed in observation, adjustment, and the seamless flow of synchronized action. Encounters with opposing Pokémon required the same subtle approach. Rather than rush, Gary emphasized timing, measured movement, and anticipation. Each response was deliberate, emphasizing harmony over confrontation. His partner mirrored this precision, moving in fluid alignment with his guidance. Together, they navigated the challenges of the gym with calm attentiveness, the rhythm of perception and action sustained without disruption. Every pause, adjustment, and response reinforced trust, skill, and the quiet bond that had grown through shared experience. As afternoon shifted toward evening, Gary reached the final sequence within the gym. The challenges became slightly more complex, integrating moving platforms, shallow water, and multiple Pokémon simultaneously. His movements were steady, deliberate, and fully attuned to the subtle cues of both the environment and his partner. Each step, gesture, and shift in weight was synchronized, reinforcing the calm yet precise execution necessary to navigate the sequence successfully. The gym was not a test of aggression, but of awareness, timing, and the seamless integration of preparation with instinct. The final encounter emerged naturally, with a larger water-type Pokémon advancing in measured steps. Gary guided his partner with subtle cues, coordinating motion, attention, and anticipation to navigate the challenge efficiently and calmly. The Pokémon responded with fluid precision, maintaining balance and control throughout. Gary observed, adjusted, and synchronized continuously, allowing the interaction to unfold as a quiet exercise in harmony. The completion of the sequence was not marked by triumph, but by steady mastery, a subtle recognition of the culmination of preparation, awareness, and trust. With the final challenge concluded, Gary stepped back, observing his partner and the arena with composed satisfaction. The gym had provided not only a structured test, but also an environment for reflection, growth, and deepened understanding. Mastery had been expressed not in speed or force, but in patient observation, deliberate movement, and unspoken communication. Every element of the gym had reinforced the rhythm of anticipation, awareness, and responsive action cultivated over the journey. Exiting the gym, Gary paused briefly, allowing the warmth of evening light to wash over him. The city carried a quiet hum, the river reflected faint glimmers of sun, and distant sounds of movement marked the ongoing life of Cerulean. He reflected on the layered continuity of the journey. Each forest, city, hill, and river had offered instruction, patience, and the cultivation of awareness. The gym had crystallized these lessons into a tangible practice, a synthesis of observation, timing, and harmonized action. As dusk deepened, Gary guided his partner to a small grove near the riverbank. The soft air, gentle movement of water, and quiet rustle of foliage created an environment conducive to reflection and rest. He allowed his partner to explore briefly, observing subtle shifts in stance, gaze, and movement, reinforcing awareness, trust, and harmony. Together, they absorbed the calm pulse of the surroundings, preparing for the night and the continuation of their journey. Night settled softly, stars appearing gradually above, reflecting on the water's surface and casting faint shadows across the grove. Gary returned his partner to its Pokeball with quiet care, sensing the depth of trust and shared awareness that had been cultivated through countless interactions and experiences. He lay beneath the trees, breathing in rhythm with the river, attuned to the layered nuances of the world, and allowing sleep to arrive gently, carrying with it reflection, patience, and the continuity of growth. The gym challenge, though complete, was merely a step along the broader journey. Every lesson learned, the subtle coordination, attentive observation, and measured responsiveness was a foundation for the days to come. Gary embraced the night with calm assurance, knowing that mastery was not a singular achievement, but a flowing continuum, sustained through observation, patience, and harmonious interaction between trainer, partner, and environment. As sleep deepened, Gary's mind, breathing, and spirit aligned with the quiet pulse of the city, river, and surrounding landscape. Each step, each breath, each observation of the day had reinforced the enduring rhythm of growth and connection. The journey continued, expansive yet measured, steady and deliberate, a seamless integration of skill, awareness, and trust, moving forward into the unfolding narrative of both challenge and discovery. The first light of dawn spread gently across the horizon, casting a soft glow over Cerulean City and the flowing river that traced its edges. Gary awoke with a sense of quiet purpose, the calm rhythm of preparation and observation already embedded within him. The gym challenge had deepened awareness, patience, and coordination, and now the journey continued beyond the city's limits. Each breath mirrored the soft pulse of the morning, and every movement was guided by subtle observation and intuitive alignment with the surrounding world. His partner emerged from its Pokeball with measured stretches and deliberate motions, attuning to the crisp morning air. Gary observed each subtle adjustment, the shifting of weight, the alignment of stance, the gaze that continuously scanned the environment. Their shared rhythm had grown into a seamless flow, a dialogue without sound in which intention and response intertwined naturally. Each day further refined the trust and synchronization that now defined the partnership, an invisible yet undeniable current of understanding guiding every action. The path out of Cerulean City was bordered by gentle streams and clusters of soft green trees, the interplay of sunlight and shadow shifting continuously over the landscape. Gary moved with careful deliberation, noticing small disturbances in soil, the faint ripple of water, and the subtle sway of grass in the morning breeze. Each cue provided insight into the presence of wild Pokémon and the nuanced behaviors of the terrain. Every step was deliberate, balancing awareness with forward movement, reinforcing a quiet attentiveness that had become second nature. Along the route, encounters with wild Pokémon unfolded naturally. A pair of Pidgey glided overhead, responding to the wind's currents and each other's movements. Rattata and Nidoran emerged intermittently from grass and low shrubs, their presence marked by subtle motion and slight rustling sounds. Gary guided his partner through these interactions with minimal intervention, emphasizing synchronization, observation, and calm responsiveness. Each movement reinforced the silent dialogue between trainer and Pokémon, emphasizing harmony over confrontation. By mid-morning, the path led to a gently undulating meadow with intermittent clusters of wildflowers and shallow streams. Gary paused briefly, allowing his partner time to explore while observing environmental cues, the direction of the wind, the movement of small insects, and the subtle ripple of water along the edges of pools. The landscape offered continuous lessons in attention, timing, and the delicate balance between observation and action. Each subtle shift of light, sound, or motion provided an opportunity to refine perception and anticipation. The journey progressed toward a distant, wooded area. The transition from open meadow to forest introduced a layered complexity. Shifting light through tree canopies, uneven forest floors, and the subtle presence of hidden Pokémon. Gary moved deliberately, adjusting posture and movement to maintain stability, while remaining attuned to environmental cues. Every glance, breath, and weight shift was a conscious reinforcement of awareness, patience, and responsiveness. The forest became both a setting and a teacher, offering guidance through subtlety rather than instruction. Within the woods, encounters became more nuanced. Grass rustled in patterns indicating concealed Rattata, the movement of leaves suggested cautious Nidoran, and the occasional call of Pidgey hinted at activity above. Gary's guidance relied on observation, anticipation, and minimal physical cues, allowing his partner to respond intuitively. These interactions were exercises in subtle communication and harmonized motion, emphasizing skill, timing, and silent coordination over forceful engagement. By afternoon, Gary discovered a gently sloping hill overlooking a meandering stream that fed into the forest. He paused to observe the flow of water, the reflection of light on its surface, the delicate movements of aquatic and terrestrial Pokémon interacting with the environment. His partner mirrored this calm observation, maintaining attentive posture and responsive alignment. Together, they absorbed the nuanced lessons embedded in terrain, water flow, and Pokémon behavior, reinforcing trust, awareness, and synchronization. The descent into the forest's deeper reaches revealed hidden paths lined with moss and softened soil, requiring careful foot placement and continuous observation. Gary adjusted his movements to maintain balance and anticipates subtle environmental shifts, slight dips, uneven roots, and low-hanging branches. His partner responded intuitively, mirroring adjustments and maintaining alignment. Each step reinforced the shared rhythm of perception, coordination, and patience, essential in navigating both natural and dynamic environments. Encounters continued, increasingly subtle and instructive. Wild Pokémon moved with quiet agility, testing attention and timing. Gary guided his partner through measured responses, emphasizing awareness, adaptability, and the careful timing of motion. Every interaction reinforced the principles honed over weeks: observation, anticipation, and synchronization between trainer, partner, and environment. Mastery was expressed not in speed or dominance, but in the calm execution of deliberate, mindful action. As evening approached, the forest's depth transformed the light, casting long, dappled shadows across moss, roots, and leaves. Gary paused atop a small rise, observing the layers of the environment, the interaction of light and shadow, the subtle patterns of wildlife, and the flowing streams beneath. The forest's complexity offered both challenge and insight, demonstrating the importance of attuned perception, patient adjustment, and coordinated movement. He allowed the moment to settle into consciousness, reinforcing reflection, awareness, and calm readiness. Finding a sheltered hollow nearby, Gary guided his partner to rest, releasing it briefly to explore and maintain attunement to the environment. Every subtle motion, glance, and posture adjustment was observed, reinforcing silent dialogue and continuous learning. The forest around them breathed with quiet energy. Insects hummed softly, leaves rustled with subtle wind, and water rippled through the stream, providing a steady rhythm that harmonized with their own movements and reflections. Nightfall draped the forest in muted shades, with soft starlight filtering through gaps in foliage. Nocturnal Pokémon emerged gradually, their rustling and subtle calls adding depth to the ambient rhythm. Gary returned his partner to its Pokéball, sensing the resonance of trust, awareness, and calm shared through the day. Beneath the shelter of the hollow, he lay down, allowing the quiet pulse of forest, stream, and wind to guide breath, reflection, the arrival of sleep. The day's journey offered lessons in both observation and adaptation. Each environment, meadow, stream, and forest, provided distinct challenges and subtle guidance in timing, perception, and coordination. Every encounter reinforced the quiet dialogue between trainer and Pokémon, emphasizing patience, trust, and harmonized action. Sleep embraced Gary with the accumulated serenity of the day, carrying awareness, reflection, and readiness for the journey yet to unfold. Beyond Cerulean, the horizon stretched expansive and inviting, each subtle contour a promise of learning, discovery, and growth. Gary's steps remained deliberate, measured, and attentive, each movement a reinforcement of rhythm, observation, and harmony with both partner and world. The journey continued, expansive yet measured, rich in quiet lessons and subtle insights, the pulse of experience guiding each step, breath, and reflection through the softly unfolding tapestry of adventure. The first light of dawn spread slowly across the forest beyond Cerulean, casting soft, golden hues upon the gentle rise of hills, the winding stream, and the delicate canopy of leaves overhead. Gary awoke with the calm certainty that each day, each step, and each breath was part of a continuous flow, a rhythm that connected trainer, Pokémon, and the surrounding world. The journey, though expansive, was not measured merely in distance, challenges, or victories, but in the deepening awareness and quiet mastery cultivated along every step. His partner emerged with the familiar, fluid motions of stretching, flexing, and attuning to the morning air. Gary observed each subtle shift, the gentle alignment of limbs, the focused gaze, and the deliberate readiness conveyed without urgency. Over time, their shared rhythm had grown into an almost imperceptible dialogue, a synchronized flow of perception and response that guided each movement, anticipation, and action. The bond was quiet, yet profound, a living testament to trust, observation, and unspoken understanding. The path ahead meandered through gentle forested slopes, soft moss-covered terrain, and shallow streams interspersed with rocks worn smooth by water and time. Gary walked with measured attention, noting the faint impressions left by passing wildlife, the subtle bend of grass under unseen weight, and the quiet ripple of water over stone. Each observation, though small, informed his steps, posture, and the guidance he offered his partner. Awareness had become a natural extension of motion, a quiet undercurrent linking every aspect of the journey. Wild Pokémon revealed themselves with graceful subtlety. A small flock of Pidgey shifted in response to wind currents, their movement patterned and fluid. Nidoran and Rattata emerged intermittently from undergrowth, their presence suggested only by tiny rustles in leaves or fleeting shadows on the forest floor. Gary allowed his partner to engage intuitively, providing minimal cues and relying on their shared understanding of timing, balance, and perception. These moments reinforced the calm, continuous dialogue that had come to define their interactions. As morning deepened, Gary reached a gentle ridge overlooking the expanse of forest, river, and distant hills. He paused, allowing both himself and his partner to absorb the landscape. Sunlight filtered through trees in shifting patterns. Water glimmered softly below, and distant Pokémon moved in quiet, natural harmony. Gary noted how each element, the rhythm of water, the sway of branches, the subtle vibrations of life, intertwined to create a continuous pattern of observation and adaptation. Every detail was a lesson, a reminder of harmony between presence and movement. Descending toward a meandering stream that cut softly through the terrain, Gary allowed his partner to explore briefly, observing interactions with the environment, the gentle lapping of water against stones, delicate ripple caused by Magikarp and Poliwag, and the subtle sway of vegetation in the current. Each observation reinforced the importance of patience, attentive movement, and attunement. The world provided instruction in continuous cycles of adaptation, reflection, and measured engagement. Gary's own awareness deepened with each small, deliberate interaction. The forest thickened gently, sunlight filtering through dense foliage and casting long, shifting shadows across the mossy ground. Gary adjusted each step with careful precision, noting uneven terrain, exposed roots, and the slight curvature of stone or soil that required mindful balance. The path was not difficult, yet it demanded attention, coordination, and the calm, deliberate application of observation learned over many days. His partner mirrored this precision, every movement responsive, deliberate, and synchronized with Gary's subtle cues. Encounters with wild Pokémon became increasingly nuanced. Rustles in the Pokémon undergrowth, faint movements of leaves, and distant calls provided instruction in timing, patience, and quiet engagement. Gary guided his partner through these encounters with measured attention, emphasizing subtlety, observation, and responsiveness rather than force or rapid action. Each interaction was a reinforcement of rhythm, trust, and shared awareness. Mastery was expressed not in conquest, but in harmonious alignment of perception, action, and environment. By afternoon, Gary reached a gentle clearing where sunlight pooled across soft grass, moss, and shallow pools of water. He paused to absorb the scene. Water shimmered with muted reflections. Insects hummed softly, and distant Pokémon moved with natural fluidity. His partner explored quietly, attentive to the same subtleties, maintaining balance and focus while reinforcing the shared rhythm of awareness. The clearing became a moment of reflection, reinforcing patience, observation, and the quiet interweaving of experience with environment. The journey continued along soft hills and gentle slopes, rivers winding through forests and occasional clusters of rocks or trees. Gary noticed subtle shifts in wind, temperature, and sound, allowing each element to guide posture, balance, and movement. The rhythm of nature, water flowing, leaves rustling, distant calls echoing, became a metronome for breath, thought, and coordinated action. Gary and his partner moved as one, responding intuitively to both environmental cues and the unspoken communication that had grown over countless days of shared experience. As evening approached, the The sky shifted to warm tones of gold, pink, and soft lavender. Shadows lengthened, the flow of rivers reflected shifting light, and distant hills exhaled a quiet, measured calm. Gary guided his partner to a gentle ridge overlooking the journey traversed. Cerulean behind, forests and rivers stretching outward, and the horizon hinting at paths yet unseen. The view carried a quiet, meditative reassurance. The journey had been expansive, deliberate, and rich in subtle growth, yet its continuity promised further discovery. He paused, breathing deeply, allowing both partner and self to rest briefly. Every motion, glance, and adjustment of the day had reinforced trust, harmony, and attentive observation. The Pokémon mirrored the calm energy, exploring lightly, adjusting stance, and responding fluidly to cues without overt direction. The bond between trainer and partner was fully realized in this quiet symphony of shared awareness, trust, and attuned responsiveness. As nightfall draped the forest in muted shades, stars gradually appearing overhead, Gary returned his partner to its Pokeball. The quiet pulse of the world, water flowing softly, wind moving gently through leaves, nocturnal calls beginning in distant undergrowth, resonated in alignment with his breathing, thoughts, and reflection. The day, like the journey itself, was a meditation in rhythm, observation, and measured action, a continuing cycle of learning, awareness, and attunement. Lying beneath a gently arching tree, Gary allowed sleep to come naturally. The forest, river, and distant hills pulsed with quiet continuity, carrying the lessons of perception, patience, and harmony into his rest. The journey had been expansive, deliberate, and profound, each encounter, step, and breath building upon the last. Horizons stretched forward, yet the present moment held full attention, calm reflection, and measured awareness. Sleep enveloped him gently, carrying with it the serene continuity of experience and the subtle expansion of growth. Within the stillness of night, Gary embraced the quiet constancy of the journey. The forest's whisper, the river's rhythm, and the gentle sway of distant trees reflected a seamless flow of learning, perception, and reflection. Each day's experiences, forests, rivers, hills, and cities, had contributed layers of insight, patience, and mastery, culminating in a quiet, expansive understanding of the relationship between trainer, Pokémon, and the world. Sleep carried him, gently and uninterrupted, into rest, reflection, and the calm readiness for the adventures yet to unfold. The journey continued, not measured by milestones, victories, or external accolades, but by the quiet expansion of awareness, the subtle deepening of trust, and the seamless flow of interaction between trainer, partner, and environment. Horizons stretched endlessly, each one inviting observation, patience, and harmonious movement. Gary rested in this understanding, fully attuned to the present, yet gently carrying forward the continuity of experience, ready for every subtle lesson the world would offer in its unfolding rhythm.